By the way, I'm sorry. I'm a little bit hoarse tonight, and I wish I had a good reason, like being sick or having to shout to save a child or something.
Is shouting save children? Is that how it works?
I don't know. The truth is that I am alone in my house tonight, and therefore a lot of singing has occurred. And I regret to inform you that I have neither of the singing range of Paul Simon nor Art Garfunkel. That's the real reason why I sound slightly hoarse tonight.
I was going to say, if you were listening to Fish, how are you doing any singing?
Right?
I also listen to other music sometimes.
All right.
I mean, not a lot, if I'm honest. Sometimes.
Oh, man. It's funny to me how you tactically deploy your executive assistant for media acquisition purposes.
Oh, yeah. Whenever I want to pirate anything, I always ask Casey how to do it. Because, I haven't pirated things in mass in a very long time, since high school, really. So all the modern ways to do it, I don't really know about them. And I'm certainly not, set up for them. So I always have to ask my other friends, hey, there's this, concert I want to download, and it's only letting me do, a video on demand. How do I download it?
Indeed. But yeah, I got a text message out of the blue saying, hey, there's this time-limited thing I really want to download. What can I do? And I gave some pointers as to just hypothetical things that one could try, but we would never do. But you could try them. And it turns out that you didn't need my help because you found it by a mechanism all your own. But
well, someone else said it to me, basically. But I think it's interesting, in the history of things that can be shown in a web browser, typically there were tools that were pretty reliably able to download those things, because it's at some level it would be a bunch of MPEG-4 files in a series on a server in a playlist or something like that. But now there appears to be pretty widespread use of whatever kind of DRM. I think maybe Widevine is one of them, but whatever kind of DRM exists now on HLS streams, it seems like it's everywhere now. And so all the tools YouTube DL or YTDLP or whatever, all these tools basically don't work anymore on a lot of paid video services because they all use this DRM, which I'm not a fan of DRM as a technologist. So, that irritates me on a lot of levels. But I'm also just kind of surprised that none of these tools have caught up yet. Because it seems I don't know how this stuff works these days. I'm sure there's a lot of OS level integrations, but somehow every web browser, including stuff like Firefox, they can all play the DRM streams just fine. And screen recording software that is still a loophole. You can still run a screen recording, not with all apps. QuickTime Player will just give you a black square, but some apps will just record the screen in some way that includes the content. So you can do it that way, which is a terrible way to do it, I know. But I'm kind of amazed that all these tools are not able to break this DRM for something that is common enough that it can play in every web browser. But I don't know. We live in kind of a sad time that there's just that much DRM everywhere in our computing lives now, and we don't even blink an eye. It's just that's just considered normal. It's kind of sad.
Are you talking about fish stuff? I thought all that was free, man.
No, it's not, and I don't need it to be free. I buy the MP3. You can buy audio downloads that are all DRM free.
That's what I was saying. You pay the money and you get a bunch of files, but they're DRM free.
That's audio only, though. If you want to see the video streams, you pay per show something like $40, and then you can watch the stream for 48 hours or and or live. But then the real problem is you can't buy it afterwards. So you can watch it for only the 48 hours after the concert has occurred. But if you want to watch it next week or next year, you just can't. You can't rebuy it. There's no way to watch it. It's just gone. So, and this Fish New Year show was a really important show.
It was important, was
okay,
it?
Explain yourself. Use more words. Why was this an important show?
I'm not even going to try to explain, but basically there was a ton of fan service references that go back 30 years in the band, that were brought together in a big way. And so it was a very important show for Fish fans. And so I wanted to really make sure, I really want to have a copy of this. Because look, I don't know what the band's archival situation is. I assume that they are saving all of their videos and at some point in the future might make them available in some way, maybe, I hope. But I don't want to rely on maybe, I hope, for a really important concert for my favorite band of my life. Like, I want to actually have it.
This is where the community comes in, though. Like, couldn't you just rely on the fact that this is a popular band and you don't have to do this? All you got to do is wait for the people who already know how to do this to upload the stream that they ripped from the thing?
Yeah, but upload it where? That's the problem. Like, I don't know all the places that people go now.
I really hope Adam can help you in your old age.
I know he's going to have to. Well, right now Casey is my video piracy, assistant. Eventually, Adam will take over and help both of us. But we're not there yet.
That's not piracy if you paid for it and you're just time shifting it. I think we already had several court cases about that, and the VCR was allowed to exist. So if you pay for something, like if you pay for cable television and they air it and send it to you and you record it on a device, I know you've got the DMCA with the you're not supposed to crack encryption, blah, 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 but I feel like you're at least ethically, if not legally, in the clear here.
Well, I think it's a little questionable, and we'll get to copyright stuff later, actually. But I think it's a little questionable because, like, I'm not paying $40 to own it forever. I'm paying $40 to watch it once.
I know, but it's the same thing when you pay for cable. You're not paying to own all those shows that are broadcast to your house forever, but you do pay the cable company to send you video. And if you have a device in your home that records that video for time shifting purposes, like a video cassette recorder, that turns out to be legal according to all of the court cases. The only wrinkle in this entire scheme is, now we have a thing called DRM that stops you from recording it. And because of the DMCA, it's illegal for you to try to crack DRM. And I think there is no distinction between paying for cable to be broadcast in your house and then time shifting with VCR, and then paying for a video of a concert to be streamed into your house and then time shifting it with FFmpeg. The only difference is that stupid law that says you're not allowed to even try to crack encryption, which is incredibly stupid and we should get rid of, but it is what it is.
I mean, there's a whole lot of this that's stupid, but I don't think that necessarily would hold up to legal scrutiny.
No, because of the DMCA, because it's illegal to try to crack encryption. But aside from that one thing, it is exactly the same as the time shifting with the VCR case. Because in both cases, like, well, you just paid to have it sent to your house once. You didn't pay to keep it forever. But the courts found, no, if you have a device that can record it, it's yours.
Is that really what the decision? I don't know enough about it. Is that really?
Yeah, the whole point was, like, you can't have a video cassette recorder in your house because then when we air Star Wars on ABC and you record it, now you have a copy of Star Wars and you didn't pay for that. And the decision was you're allowed to do that. You're not allowed to resell it. You're not allowed to sell tickets to it or whatever, but you were allowed to time shift. That was called time shifting. You take something that was aired and you put it on some storage medium so you can watch it at a different time. And the only legal thing stopping you now is they made a law that says, okay, if we put some magic pixie dust DRM on this, even if it's trivially easy to crack, if you do that, you're breaking the law. And that's why you had the DCSS t-shirts with the Pearl code on it that was, illegal and all that crap.
Like the one prime number that broke the key or whatever.
Yeah, it's absurd. But that is the legal system we have. That's why I said ethically, I think you're in the clear, if not legally.
I wonder if a screen recording method might actually sort of not be a DMCA. I don't know.
Because you didn't try to crack the encryption, probably.
But you could argue like the software might have cracked it, even though it's not.
Is not compliant or whatever.
But it's just recording the screen contents, so like it's not.
Yeah, I think that's probably fine because I think it's like the analog loophole. Remember that whole thing of like, the way to record it is you're not cracking the encryption on the DVD. You're just playing the DVD over an analog video cable and then intercepting it there.
Yeah, all of the machinations now about like how having these secure video paths that are supported by the hardware and HDMI and everything, and trying to ensure DRM so that you can't do stuff like screen recording or just HDMI capture of protected content,
or take a screenshot because you want to tweet something funny about a TV show. It's the worst.
I know, frankly, I don't actually know how certain screen recording methods somehow get around it and others don't. I'm glad they do, but the amount of grief this causes legitimate users all the time. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've been, maybe like traveling and trying to output something over HDMI to a TV or something, and some part of the chain doesn't fit the DRM's standards, and so it just refuses, and I guess I can't watch this movie that I paid for, like stream from my laptop onto the hotel TV or whatever. Like, it's so annoying. I hate DRM so much.
It's dumb because, as we all know, none of that stuff actually stops the stuff from being available illegally. All it does is frustrate legitimate users.
I think we talked about this just a couple months ago because I just ran across this recently, but there is a website, a Dave Matthews Band fan website, where it has a Q&A with the crew. Now, this very well may be very, very old, But somebody asked, you had listed a 24-track hard disk recorder under the recording equipment, but 39 inputs to the board. Do you mix channels or record on multiple, 24-track recorders, blah, 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 blah? The answer is we actually have 8 Tascam 24s, 3 pairs working in main and backup modes with 2 spares. 46 tracks are recorded every day, which includes the band's input list plus several audience mics and other inputs. The hard drives get sent back to an archivist in Charlottesville, who then dumps each track to a separate CDR for permanent storage in a vault. Each show will generate about 138 CDRs, and that's audio. That's not even video.
Did we discuss this already? And did we freak out about
we did.
CDRs?
We did indeed.
Time?
Yeah, they better be using M discs.
Yep.
Yeah, because I really think putting them on a CDR and then putting them in a vault are two sentiments that are a little bit at odds with each other.
I totally agree with you. But my point is, Marco had justifiably asked, is this a flash in the pan, this video recording? Does Fish keep a copy of this video recording, or is this a one and done?
I don't know. I mean, I assume someone is archiving all this stuff. I hope.
Agreed.
But I don't know. Like they don't usually release archival videos. Like they release archival audio sometimes. I don't think they tend to release archival video much, if at all. So I don't know. That's why it's a little unnerving, and that's why and I think I have a lot of a lot of sympathy from the two of you on this. I want to be a digital pack rat for stuff that I can't just easily just get off the internet again. Stuff that's really important to me. I actually want to have my own copy, because we all know from the tech world, everything out there that's especially DRM stuff through streaming services or whatever, it's all so temporary. You think you own it, even when you buy it and you think you quote own it, then Sony pulls a fast one or something like that, a story, and then it's just gone. The stuff you quote bought is gone or unavailable or whatever. And that stuff annoys me so much. I think we live in a time where a huge amount of modern culture, in the form of both media and also software and games and everything like that, a huge amount of it is going to be basically inaccessible to historians in the future because of technological means or encryption or SSL breaking or whatever. There's so many things that the previous eras of media that we've had decades ago, we can all still access those today, but the stuff that we are making and using and enjoying today, I think we're going to have a very hard time, re-enjoying or re-experiencing that in 20 years.
Yeah, I think it's probably mostly the trend line is upwards still, because all the stuff before recorded medium is totally lost. People sang and there was nothing to record them on for most of human history. And then we had this period where it was recorded with no DRM, and now we have it recorded with DRM, but we have so much more storage now. I think we're saving so much more stuff. It's going to be a lot easier for historians to find that old stuff. Even if, maybe we're not saving it DRM encrypted, but even if they are, it will be eventually trivial to break that DRM encryption. So I think we're doing better overall, but there is definitely a hiccup in the whole introduction of DRM that's going to cause some headaches, but it's still better than wax cylinders, and it's still way better than no way to record performances at all.
Let's do some follow-up. And we have a paper about Apple's on-device LLM. LLM in a flash, efficient large language model inference with limited memory. Can you tell me about this, please, John?
I think it was last episode we were talking about maybe the Ask ATP question about what we thought Apple would do to run LLM stuff on device with wimpy devices like the HomePod. And we referenced this, I alluded to this paper, but we didn't have a link to it. So now we will in the show notes. This is a summary from someone on Threads. It says, Apple has proposed an inference cost model that coordinates with the behavior of flash memory usage, guiding optimization in 2 key areas: reducing the amount of data transferred from flash memory and reading data in larger, more continuous blocks. These methods collectively enable running models up to twice the size of available DRAM, with 4x to 5x and 20x to 25x increase in inference speed compared to naive loading approaches in CPU and GPU, respectively. So this is, you can read the paper to see, but it's hey, Apple has a bunch of devices that have limited DRAM, and if you wanted to run one of those better models, then you can't fit it in DRAM. Is there a way you can get reasonable performance out of it while essentially overflowing your RAM and using flash as a backing store? And they have some techniques to speed that up, and that is extremely relevant to pretty much everything that Apple makes, with the exception of Macs, where you are probably going to be RAM limited. And a lot of these large language models, I know the first L is for large, but you can size them. You can even, in a lot of the cases, take a really big honkin' model that takes a huge amount of resources and take that exact model and cut it down in some way, without making a new model, to size it to fit within whatever your constraints are. And it sounds like this approach in this paper would let Apple use models a little bit bigger than they otherwise would be able to on their wimpy hardware.
Apple is also exploring AI deals with news publishers. This was in the New York Times. Apple has opened negotiations in recent weeks with major news and publishing organizations seeking permission to use their material in the company's development of generative artificial intelligence systems. According to 4 people familiar with the discussions, the technology giant has floated multi-year deals worth at least $50 million to license the archives of news articles, said the people with knowledge of talks. For the record, Apple, for 10% of that, for a mere $5 million, you are welcome to use caseylist.com in its entirety in training your model.
I thought you were going to offer up the ATP archives. I think we need to collectively negotiate with Apple for those, even though they're already publicly available. We may have started at a disadvantage in this negotiation already.
Fair, but have your people call our people.
Yeah, so this is something that a few companies are doing. Adobe is the other one that comes to mind, where they have a bunch of generative AI stuff in the latest version of Photoshop that I believe Adobe has claimed, hey, we trained all of our models on images that we own or have the rights to, so they're essentially legally in the clear. If it's not Adobe and it's actually some other like stock photo company, I forget. But anyway, companies are doing this where they're like, we want to be able to provide a service to our customers with no doubt, no legal doubt about however this whole court stuff comes out with the AI training. It's like we trained our models on stuff that we own, because some companies own a large volume of images, for example, like a stock photo company or whatever. It might be the stock photo company I'm thinking of. It not what is it called? Shutterstock, or maybe it's
something like that.
Getty Images. They're the big one.
Getty Images. Yeah. Anyway, Apple. This is totally an Apple move to say we can solve this problem with money. If there's any kind of questions about the legality, how about we just give people millions of dollars in exchange for them letting us train our AI model on their content.
The New York Times, speaking of, is suing OpenAI and Microsoft for copyright infringement. The New York Times is suing OpenAI and Microsoft for copyright infringement, claiming the two companies built their AI models by copying and using millions of the publication's articles and now, quote-unquote, directly compete with its content as a result. As outlined in the lawsuit, the Times alleges OpenAI and Microsoft's large language models, which power ChatGPT and Copilot, can generate output that recites Times content verbatim, closely summarizes it, and mimics its expressive style. This undermines and damages the Times' relationship with readers, the outlet alleges, while also depriving it of subscription licensing, advertising, and affiliate revenue.
That nicely ties into both the previous story. If Apple is offering these people millions of dollars for the content, but Microsoft is just taking it for free and then getting sued over it, you can see where Apple might have thought this is a wiser move in the short term. We've talked about this many times in the past, about whether it is, again, ethics, morals, and legalities, whether it is right to train a large language model on, for example, the publicly accessible web pages containing content of New York Times stories. People can make arguments that it is, it's transformational and it's, fair use or whatever legal precedent you don't want to use for it, or it's an entirely new thing. We have to have a new set of laws governing or whatever. But clearly the New York Times thinks, hey, if you train your large language model on New York Times articles and now people use your thing and don't ever go to the New York Times because they essentially get the article summarized or excerpted in your thing or whatever, that's, under current law, that's illegal, and now we're suing you over it or whatever. As I said in many past times when we discuss this, I continue to think that it should not be legal to train a large language model on content that you don't own, because your large language model is worthless without that content. An empty large language model that has not been trained on anything is worth $0. And you can say, well, we can make this valuable by feeding it the contents of the New York Times. Well, the New York Times, should either let you do that, or they should be compensated for it, or we need to figure out some other thing. But I don't think you should just get it free just because. But that's the type of thing that is going to be hashed out in court. And again, Apple is neatly sidestepping this by saying, I don't care whether it's legal or not. Here's millions of dollars. Can we use your articles? Yes, no. And that is a much more straightforward arrangement of value exchange. What's the right amount of money for that? Is it like, a penny per article, or like even less, or like what, how people who are training large language models negotiate with people who own the content that they're being trained on? We'll see. There's always sort of publicly available things, like I think Wikipedia says you're allowed to train on it, but whether they do or not, everybody does. So yeah, this is entirely in a big legal gray area, and I think Apple's approach is the right one for now, and Adobe and whatever company I couldn't remember that's also doing the same thing. Train on data that you own or have licensed. And then if it turns out that, oh, actually the courts say you're allowed to get this for free, then don't pay them next year. But if it turns out that the New York Times wins their case and gets millions of dollars in damages, you were always on the right side of that. So kudos to Apple for using its money using its money wisely.
Yeah, this is a case to watch because there's been so many kind of questions about AI training and its relation to copyright law. And is training an AI on public material that that's owned by somebody else, is that copyright infringement? I don't know if that's a clear-cut argument either way. Like it's definitely like a new area. And this is what happens with the law. Over time, like new problems arise or new conditions or new distinctions need to be made. And that's what the law and the legal system is made to sort out and decide. It remains a huge open question mark of like, can you just train AI models on whatever you want? I still believe that is not copyright infringement necessarily, because like if you look at the New York Times is making some pretty strong claims here that these LLMs that they tested were able to output Times articles verbatim. But if you look at what kind of prompts they had to give them, the way it worked was basically the New York Times would feed it like the first few paragraphs of an article and say what comes next. And so the way LLMs work on a general high level overview of the way LLMs work is basically like statistically speaking what comes next given this prompt. And so when they give it a few paragraphs of a story from the New York Times verbatim and say what comes next after this, there is probably no other statistical influence on what the model could draw from. So of course it's going to say, okay, well, the one source I saw that contained everything you're asking for, this was next.
I think part of that demonstration, part of the point of that demonstration is to do something that is otherwise difficult to do, which is essentially to prove that they did train on your data. Because it's not like when you see an LLM, you can ask it, hey, tell me all the stuff that you ingested. It doesn't work that way. They can't answer that question. It's not like they're trying to keep it a secret. A large language model does not contain within it a complete exhaustive list of all the data that it was trained on, right? I mean, it does in sort of a smushed up fuzzy way, but not like in a literal way. So if as part of the case, I don't know if this is in this particular case, but if as part of the case, the people with the LLM said, we never trained on your data, you can pull this out and say, I think it's pretty unlikely that it would produce these verbatim, 7 paragraphs, right? So there's that. And I don't know in this case. Again, Microsoft could freely admit that they trained from the New York Times, and that's a moot point. But the language in the little summary we excerpted from is directly trying to tie it to existing law, because that's what they have to do in a court case. If there are no laws directly addressing this, you're going to come and say, I think you are in violation of these existing laws. And so one of those is like the whole fair use doctrine of like, is the thing a substitute for the thing that it is taking from? And like saying like a 2-second clip of a movie is not a substitute for the movie. No one is saying, I was going to watch the movie, but instead I'm going to watch this 2-second clip. And they're saying that these LLMs directly compete with its content, saying it is a substitute. It is directly competing with our stuff. It's not just like a Google search result where you see a headline, you see like a link and then like 2 sentences, but you have to click through to read the story. No one is looking at that and saying, well, I felt like I've read the whole story. Whereas here they're saying, within existing copyright law, you do not fall under this section of fair use because you are directly competing with us rather than just, not being a substitute or whatever. So we'll see if they succeed in that strategy, because to your point, Marco, the existing laws don't address this because it's a new use case, but that's when you bring a case, you have to say, I think some existing laws you're already in violation of, and we'll see how that works out legally. My point has always been, regardless of what the current laws say, I think it shouldn't be legal so that to do what they're doing just willy-nilly. So there should be some kind of law made governing this, or if laws aren't made governing it, then at the very least what we'll get is precedents in court cases. I don't like things being determined by precedents in court cases because I forget what the saying is. I always get it backwards, but like hard cases make bad law or something like that, where it's better to just say what you actually want to happen through legislation, and to the degree that our government can actually function, that would be the more desirable thing. But anytime any laws are made surrounding technology, we all kind of, grit our teeth a little bit. So we'll see how this goes.
Yeah, I mean, because I don't think it's that clear cut. Their claims, they say that it can recite Times content verbatim. Okay, we covered that. But there's already laws against that. Reciting Times content verbatim is copyright infringement. That's direct, because it's like this is a copyrighted work that we have on our site, and you are serving it over here. We already have laws that make that part of it illegal. They also say it closely summarizes it. Well, who cares? That's not illegal.
I don't know. I'm not sure if it depends on how close the summary is. I think existing case laws probably covers cases where it's like, well, it's not exactly verbatim. One or two words are changed here, but I'm not, I don't have exhaustive knowledge of copyright law, but that seems like something that would have come up before. For example, a newspaper essentially stealing another newspaper story and reproducing it high school student style, where you change a couple words around. I bet there have been cases about that. And again, in all those cases, here's the tricky bit, and the part I always keep trying to focus on. In all existing case law, it's humans doing things like this. Like, it's a reporter at one newspaper closely summarizing an article in another newspaper and changing the words around, right? Whereas here, it's not a human doing this. It's humans setting a machinery into motion, and the machinery spits out the New York Times article that it was fed in this series of things. So the laws governing what machines are allowed to do are much more sparse and less well tested, because they're all necessarily newer, because we haven't had machines that could do anything like this. So yeah, it's hard to say how this one's going to go, but I applaud Apple for just sidestepping in entirely, and Adobe and all these other companies, while these guys fight it out. But I do fear what the outcome of these cases are going to be, because it's like, whatever the details of this specific case are probably so weird and so specific that they shouldn't be like the placeholder for everything for all time. It would be much better for us to all sort of think about this as a society and come up with some kind of guidelines that we think will be beneficial going forward. But the more I outline that scenario, the more fantastical it sounds. So maybe we'll just get a series of legal precedents and hope for the best.
Well, and there's other ways this could be sorted out. So, like, for instance, the market might kind of go in a direction where, like, big companies like OpenAI and Microsoft, and certainly as we're seeing with what Apple's allegedly doing, big companies might decide, you know what, it's not worth the risk for me to train my models on data that might come back and bite me in the butt as a copyright infringement lawsuit later. So let me just buy stuff from known sources that I'm allowed to buy from anyway and train on that.
Or they'll settle out of court. Like, this will never actually go to a verdict. They'll settle once they see the lay of the land in the court, and whoever's losing will be compelled to come to the table, and they'll find a settlement. And basically what they'll end up with is a not quite as amicable version of what Apple has, which is, Microsoft has agreed to pay the New York Times XY millions of dollars in exchange for blah, 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 blah. And that becomes the precedent, which is like, if you can steal it if you can get away with it, but if they notice and sue you, then you have to settle for millions of dollars, which is also not a great way to do business. See also patents.
Right. But also, the models, I know shockingly little about how these new models work, so forgive me. Trying to figure that out in the coming year. But anyway, the models could also potentially be tweaked to just kind of keep track of how many original training inputs are being served for a given output, maybe?
Yeah, that's not how the models work at all right now. At all. It's much more like a one-way hash mash. You cannot reverse it. You could keep track of what did we train it on, but maybe either, accidentally or on purpose. A lot of these companies say, oh, well, we can't give you an exhaustive list of what we train. Like, just humans, hey, we'll just make a list of all the stuff we feed to the LLM, like all the URLs, all the content. We'll catalog it. And so if anyone asks, we can show them the list. But what you're asking for is what a lot of people ask for, is when I give you a prompt and you give me a result, can you tell me what contributed to that result? Because the answer is always everything I was trained on. That's the answer. There's no tell me which part did this word come from and what URLs and what documents contributed to this. That is absolutely not tracked in these things. And if you think about it, if it was, it's not. If it was, these models would be even larger. Now, it could be that legally we have to come up with some kind of tagging method to be able to incorporate that into the model so it can tell you. But I bet the answer would be these 17 million documents contributed to that result. And it's that's not useful to me. How is that useful? So, yeah, I don't. This whole lawsuit of New York Times is suing OpenAI, right? Whichever way this goes, those large language models at OpenAI were not just trained on the New York Times. They were trained on millions and millions and millions of pieces of data. Is this the system now? If you can figure out that it was trained on your data and you can hire lawyers for millions of dollars, you can sue them and hope to win something? Like, that's also a ridiculous system.
Yeah, I mean, I think my general opinion on it now is that it shouldn't be illegal for AI models to do what would be legal for humans to do.
But why do you think that?
I think a lot of this is really questions about fair use, which of course is a famously squishy, imprecise doctrine. But it is totally legal for a human to read a bunch of New York Times articles and summarize them for other people if they ask them. It is legal for a human to, like what the Times says, that the models, quote, mimic its expressive style. Well, it is totally legal for a human to mimic the New York Times' style when creating other content. The Times does not have a monopoly on style.
I'm not entirely sure it is legal for humans to closely summarize. But anyway, my whole point of this is like, yes, our laws give humans lots of rights, but this is not a human doing this.
Well, but it is tools that humans are making.
Right, but that's like making it sort of a rights laundering machine where it's like, well, if I make a machine and set it into motion, I wash my hands of it, and now I didn't do it. The computer program do it, but computer programs have no rights. They're not sentient conscious beings that have legal standing in the legal system. They are computer programs, right? There are no laws saying, and if a computer program does this, it's fine because the computer programs are allowed to do that because here are the rights. Here's the Bill of Rights for computer programs. It's not a conscious entity. It's not a, you know what I mean? Like, so, and if you make it so like, well, if a human kills someone, that's murder. But if a human pushes a button that makes a machine kill somebody, it's fine. The machine did it. And this is just a much more complicated version of push the button, machinery happens, copyright infringement.
No, I actually don't think this is like, liability laundering at all. Like, I think on the contrary, the people who create the machine become responsible for what it does. But I think it should be allowed to do what people are allowed to do, because the people are the ones creating the software that does this. The people are the ones creating the tool. So like, right now, it is legal for me to read a bunch of articles and then talk about them in summary or make a satirical imitation of the New York Times' style. That is all legal for me. However, what is not legal for me is to replicate an entire article on my own site that's someone else's. They can hit me for copyright infringement. Well, that I think is fine. And so in some ways, I think the Times actually has a case for copyright infringement in the sense that if these models can output copyrighted content in whole part, or in whole, I guess that makes sense. They have a possible case there, but I don't think they could then also say you aren't allowed to train on our data. The problem is you are reserving our data, and that becomes OpenAI and Microsoft's liability then. So they have to decide what they want to do with their models and whether they can tweak them in such a way that it can't do that anymore. But the models existing and having been trained on that data, I don't see that as a clear-cut copyright violation. They can create copyright violations afterwards, but the model just having been trained on it, I don't necessarily see that as a problem.
It's not a clear-cut copyright violation because copyright is a law that's been extended to do so many weird things. But I think it's not tenable for us to have a system where you can extract all the value from someone else's content and make something that was previously worthless, a worthless pile of code, suddenly becomes incredibly valuable because of the input of the work of others that they're not compensated for. You know what I mean? And that's why I'm saying like that shouldn't be allowed because it makes for a system where one party with these LLMs can exploit the work of others with no compensation and then make huge amounts of money off of it. And that seems like it doesn't set a great precedent. I'm not sure what the system should be, but that doesn't seem like a great system. And the closest thing that we have, legally speaking, and I think there's probably cases about this, but I don't remember them, is like Google search results. Is it illegal for Google to scrape the entire web and to make a search engine? Google is worthless without the web that it's scraping, right? And if there were cases about this, which I imagine there were because there's cases about everything, what I think the side we've come down to is we're okay with you essentially indexing and allowing access to and showing search results for, because in the end, you are providing a service that is like a catalog that leads you to the links that you then click on. But as time has gone on and Google has gotten more and more towards the side of like, well, we don't really want to send you to the links. We found some links, but actually what we're doing here is summarizing links. You don't even need to click through. We'll just summarize them. I mean, they were doing that long before LLMs, right? And that starts to get more into, okay, Google, are you a substitute for the websites? Because previously we said it's fine for Google to make $1 billion company and sell ads, because they're providing a service, a catalog, an index. They are not replacing all of those web pages. Google itself contains no information. If you want to see what's on those web pages, you got to click through them. Oh, well, they do have summaries. And I guess they do show the headline. Oh, now they're summarizing them at the top and not showing you what that came from? That's where you start to push into this. And if you're going to look at like for the closest case law and the closest argument for, you could say, well, if you think it's okay for Google to do what they're doing, then how is this not okay? Because this is just a better version of Google.
Largely, yes. I mean, I think that largely is the case that I'm making. Like, I don't see this as being that different from what Google is doing. And what Google is doing, like, you can look at it and you can say this is not ideal. You can say this is kind of a jerk thing to do, but that's very different from whether it should be legal or not. Again, we already have sufficient laws to protect against full-scale copyright infringement. Like Google, in their little info box answers they give on their search results pages, they aren't allowed to replicate an entire copyrightable work on there. That would be copyright infringement. We already have laws against that. They are allowed to stay within whatever is considered fair use. And again, that's a kind of a squishy, broad thing. But there are established standards for that, and including like how much of the work are you replicating. So if you are just like, if you have an AI model that is able to give you a one-sentence summary of a 5-paragraph article, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. That I think is clear fair use.
Yeah, well, those are the ends of the spectrum, but I feel like what the LLMs are doing is far beyond the summary at the top of Google results. But that's they're creeping towards each other, right? So Google was going that direction. LLMs took this huge leap to say, actually, no search results. I mean, the Bard does still provide them, but like I said, from my understanding is you can't back it out of the result. You can show what the documents that you trained on if you bothered to keep track of them, which you probably didn't because your lawyers probably said just don't keep track of it. But you can't, you can't show exactly where the stuff came from. But like the LLMs, we'll see how this case goes. Like the direct competition, like saying that this is a substitute for our service, that is an attempt to nullify fair use. To say, even if you just saw an excerpt or whatever, if you show sufficient information that it is now a substitute for the thing that you trained on, you're essentially stealing value from us. No one's going to go to the New York Times if all the knowledge of the New York Times is contained in your large language model. And right now, they're not that good, right? And so really, all the language isn't contained in the LLMs, and a lot of it is filled with BS or whatever. But if they could figure out how to make it not spew BS, or at least spew plausible enough BS that no one ever goes to the New York Times again, that makes the New York Times unviable as a business. And why? Because the LLMs stole all their value, and then eventually there's no more New York Times. I know this is a silly scenario, but eventually there's no more New York Times, and then what is the next LLM trained on? Which is why I think just allowing it to go hog wild is not viable. You need to come to some kind of arrangement that allows all the things that the LLMs are trained on to continue to exist for the next 100 years, for the next set of LLMs or whatever to be trained on. Otherwise, there'll be just LLMs with nothing for them to be trained on except for each other's BS, and that's not an ideal system.
Ultimately, like there's a question of what should be illegal, also, but versus what's ideal for the market or ideal for how we think things should be righteous or best, and those are very different questions. Like lots of things are legal that we think are kind of unfortunate. Lots of things are legal that are pretty, strong competition for other companies. So if new technology creates competition for someone else, like that's generally legal and usually for the benefit of the public.
Well, what you want is for laws to guide this, because if there are no laws governing it and people think it's a free-for-all, there'll never be a market solution. What you want is there to be enough laws that say these parties need to discuss things with each other, because one of them just can't take everything and ignore the other, right? If in the absence of any kind of laws or precedents or whatever, it's like, we can do whatever we want. Everything we're doing is 100% legal. You can't stop us at all. It's better to have some kind of laws governing the bounds of this such that it brings them all to the table and they come to a market solution. Because the market solution is not going to be you pay New York Times $1 for every article you trained on, because that's like billions of dollars, right? That doesn't make any sense. That's not a viable market solution. Then it'd be like, okay, well, I guess we just won't have LLMs, and I guess we'll never train in the New York Times, right? If you have enough guidelines, the parties will come together and come up with something that is feasible to say, well, if we don't talk to each other and figure something out, there are these laws that say, again, kind of like patents where there's the FRAND stuff where it's like, you can have this patent, but you have to license it to people under reasonable terms. You can't just charge them $1 bazillion or whatever. I would hope that there be some kind of laws that make the LLM companies figure out a compensation model, kind of like the ASCAP thing or whatever, when you want to do like a cover of a song or whatever. You can't just cover a song for free, but also there is a system in place that has come up with a market value for doing covers such that covers still are allowed to happen, but people are still compensated for them. And I don't know a lot about that whole system, but that's, in my mind, that's kind of the ideal of like, it's not a free-for-all, but it's also not so onerous that no one can ever sing covers anymore. And it's also, people do get paid, right? So again, maybe wishful thinking. We'll see how this works out in the court case, but I do like the idea of there being some kind of value exchange somewhere here. And I'm happy to let the market figure out that value exchange, but in the absence of any guidelines, I'm not happy to let people just say, everything is free and we're taking it all and we'll suck every ounce of value out of it. Sorry.
I mean, that's capitalism, isn't it?
Yeah, that's unbridled capitalism. We need capitalism with regulations, right? That's laissez-faire capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it tends not to work very well long term.
The tricky part is figuring out what should those guidelines be and who should they accidentally favor, usually rich people.
And everyone has a different answer.
Speaking of, let's talk Massimo. So on the 26th of December, the Biden administration said, we're not going to do anything about this. And the Apple Watch sales ban did indeed land in the U.S. Apple had a statement, again, this is 26th of December. Apple says, at Apple, we work tirelessly to create products and services that meaningfully impact users' lives. It's what drives our teams, clinical, design, and engineering, to dedicate years to developing scientifically validated health, fitness, and wellness features for Apple Watch. And we are inspired that millions of people around the world have benefited greatly from this product.
Hang on, just a moment here. Keep in mind, what you're reading is a statement after the Biden administration said, we're going to let this go through. We've got more than halfway through this statement, and Apple has said, we're pretty great. Like, it wouldn't be like a statement, we are very disappointed with the Biden administration, blah, 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 we will, blah, blah, blah. It's fully, over one half of this statement is like, we just worked so hard on this and we're so wonderful. Anyway, now what do they say?
We strongly disagree with the U.S. ITC decision and resulting exclusion order and are taking all measures to return Apple Watch Series 9, Apple Watch Ultra 2 to customers in the U.S. as soon as possible. Again, 26th December.
I bet they're going to pay Massimo a bunch of money, right? All measures. Let's see what happens next.
Surely that's what they'll do. 27 December at 11:55 a.m. Apple Watch ban has been temporarily paused. Woo! So The Verge reports that one day after the Apple Watch import ban went into effect, the U.S. Court of Appeals is instituting a brief pause while it considers a longer pause.
So the answer is, what avenues were still open? Still plenty of things they can do in the courts, and they are. That's always been Apple's play here, is they're going to exhaust every possibility, asking Biden to help them, appealing. They'll do all those things. We'll see if they get to a termination condition, which involves giving Massimo money.
Well, that was the 27th at 11:55 a.m., the 27th at 5:21 p.m. Apple resumes Apple Watch sales after the ban is paused. With the sales and import bans on hold, Apple's resumed sales of Series 9 and Ultra 2. And that's where we stand. We're recording this on, what's today, the 3rd. We still have Apple Watch on sale in the United States from Apple. So all is well, right?
I mean, that's pretty amazing considering they halted sales like a couple days after Christmas, and then one day later they turned them back on. I mean, again, it's still winding its way through the court system. But if Apple could have picked this timing, I'm not sure they could have picked anything better. Like, we get all our holiday sales, we get 1 or 2 days where we file paperwork to, we have our last ditch effort. Biden, save us. He's like, nah, don't think so. And then it gets pulled from the stores, and then one day later it's back, and now we wait for the next step.
Yeah, I mean, it worked out pretty well for Apple. Not so great for Massimo, but I mean, we'll see what happens.
Well, this is not over yet, so further updates as events transpire.
Ultimately, I think they're just going to have to settle, and they're going to have to license this, whatever this patent is. That's like that they can't get past. We are sponsored this episode by Trade Coffee. Sometimes the smallest changes can make the biggest impact. Trade Coffee is a great addition to your New Year routine. Trade is a subscription service that sources the best coffee around the country and delivers it right to your doorstep. Here's how this works. Trade has built relationships with over 55 local coffee roasters, so you can enjoy their craft from all over the country from the comfort of your own home. There's multiple ways to experience coffee with Trade, so you can sign up for a subscription or try one of their starter packs today and see how it is. I've used Trade myself, and I love it because, first of all, it's really great fresh roasted coffee. If you want to make great coffee, you need fresh roasted beans, and Trade delivers them to you on whatever your schedule and volume and needs are. You tell them, hey, I want a pound bag every 2 weeks or whatever, and they do it. You want to change it or pause it or whatever you need to do, it's super easy to do all that, so you don't need to worry about that, and it is incredibly good coffee. And what I like about Trade is that because it is sourcing it from all these different roasters, I get a huge variety of coffee. That's something that's very hard to do, and you get a really great variety with Trade. They have all sorts of features and intelligence to make sure that they're delivering flavors and roasts to you that you will like based on your express preferences, and you can give feedback to kind of guide them along, but I gotta say their hit rate's really good. Everything I get from them, I love it. It's great. So, jumpstart this year by signing up for a Trade subscription. Right now, Trade is offering a free bag with select subscription plans when you visit drinktrade.com/ATP. That's drinktrade.com/ATP for a free bag with select subscription plans. drinktrade.com/ATP. Thank you so much to Trade Coffee for helping me do everything a little bit faster in 2024 and for sponsoring our show.
2024, baby. And we should probably do a little bit of a preview as to what we think is coming in 2024. John, you've been kind enough to put a bunch of items in the show notes for us to discuss. Did you want to do this top to bottom, or are you going to let us just round robin and pick what we think is interesting?
No, I mean, you can go through the items. What I put in the list is things, well, it's in our typical show notes fashion. It's things that we more or less know are coming and what we think about them, or we're looking forward to them or whatever. And then things start getting question marks after them as we get towards the end of the list where it's like, maybe these are coming. So I think we can just go one at a time.
Vision Pro. It sounds like, I don't have links to put in the show notes handy, but it sounds like it is imminent. It probably, if I were to wager a guess, sometime this month will be at least a formal announcement as to like when it'll go on sale and whatnot. So Vision Pro could be anytime now, and I'm excited for it. I'm curious to see what the response will be. I'm curious to see how one goes to buy a Vision Pro. I mean, I know there's been a lot of talk and chatter, if not official statements, that you'll have to pick it up in store. I understand that, although I have a lot of problems with it, which we can explore if we really want. But I'm very curious to see how this looks. I'm curious to see what the gray market looks like, because I know that there's a lot of people, including many of our friends that live overseas, that are very keen to have their own Vision Pro. So how does that work? You know, if you're willing to fly yourself to New York or Richmond and want to pick up a Vision Pro, is that something that Apple will sell to you? Or does it work with a non-American Apple ID? Like, how does that look? But all that being said, I'm really excited and really interested to see what this looks like once it's in the market. I'm not excited for the work I need to do to get Call Sheet working better on it, which I've done some of, but not enough. But I am excited overall. I don't know. Marco, how do you feel about it?
Man, I'm going to have a lot to say about it once I'm allowed to talk about experiences that I will have with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, going to a lab was amazing as a developer, not so great as a podcaster.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, you're not allowed to characterize your experience, Marco. Please strike that from the record.
Yes, I went to a lab, period. But, you know, it is kind of unfortunate that, like, it's hard for me to, you know, discuss the Vision Pro and my expectations and thoughts on it because I have some experience with it that I'm not allowed to talk about. But hopefully that will be over soon. I'm with you, Casey. I think it is probably coming within probably a month. I think it's very close. And I am excited about it. I'm trying to keep my excitement in check. You know, as I figure out like what am I doing for Overcast for it, looking at the market for it, I think it's going to be a very slow burn. Like it's going to be a very slow build up because the volume is just not going to be there for a while. There was those rumors from the supply chain that the little screens they're using inside, like Sony can probably only make 1 or 2 million of those screens in a year, and so there is some speculation from the supply chain like they might not be able to make and sell more than maybe 1 million Vision Pros in the first year. And if there's any truth to that, if you figure like approximately a year from now, maybe there's 1 million of these in active use. Well, as an app developer, how many of those 1 million people are going to have my app? If I'm lucky, maybe a few hundred. Like it's going to be a very small number of people. From an app developer's perspective, there is going to be no good reason, I think, to port your app over to this unless you have a way to capture a huge portion of its users. I don't think as a podcast app, I don't think I have that.
You should make an app that looks like when you tilt the glasses upward is like you're drinking a beer. Because that's the type of app, but like that's what I'm thinking of with this launch of like, you're right, because of the supply issues, Apple is capped in how many of these they can physically make, no matter how many people want them. And keep in mind, they're $3,500 to start. So it's probably not going to be them anyway. But like, there is the kind of gold rush of like, well, people are going to get their Vision Pro and they're like, well, I've got this thing. What kind of apps can I get for it? And if you have some general purpose app, like it looks like we're talking about the iPhone app that showed like basically a beer on your phone and use the accelerometer when you tilted your phone, the beer liquid level would say level, so like you're drinking a beer. Everyone who had an iPhone got that app because you get an iPhone and you're like, what's available for this thing? And there was like not 7 things in the store, but relatively speaking, there were very few apps in the App Store. And if you were one of those apps and you were a general purpose kind of like, I'll try it. I just want to try a fun thing for my thing. You could get a massive market share of the first batch of people who bought an iPhone and make a lot of money. And that is probably going to be true on the Vision Pro, but I'm not sure a podcast player is that app. That's going to be the impulse purchase that you really want to just try out the Vision Pro. When I think Vision Pro, I don't think podcasts. So It's not particularly a visual medium, but someone's going to make that app. So I think there is going to be a mini gold rush to try to sell to 50% of the 1 million people who get Vision Pros. And Casey, to your point about the gray market stuff, this has got to be Apple's nightmare because Apple hates gray market stuff to begin with. And the thing Apple always will tell you they don't want, and they really, really don't want, which is we don't want people to have our product and have a crappy experience because they didn't get it the Apple way. And nothing could be more problematic when it comes to that situation than a thing that fits on your face that has different size things, that different size light shields and the prescription glasses and all. Like, there is no way that the gray market is going to give the buyers of those gray market things what Apple thinks the experience should be. So you're going to have developers overseas who are using uncomfortable, blurry-looking headsets because it's the only thing they could get, and they pick the prescription wrong, and they don't have the right light shield thing, and it doesn't fit their face, and and Apple's going to be like, that's not how it's supposed to be. We want you to have this experience. That's why you have to wait for us to launch in your country. Come to the Apple Store. We'll scan your face. We'll make sure we find the right, But it's like, well, I didn't do that. Instead, someone got it for me and I bought it on eBay, and I just hoped that the face shield wasn't too painful after 30 minutes. And that's not the experience Apple wants you to have. I mean, they hated gray market iPhones. They don't like when you use non-official Apple parts. They don't, just like this is their worst nightmare because the experience of Vision Pro can be so much worse. Like the floor is so low if you get one that doesn't fit right, and doesn't look right with the, prescription lenses. And so many people need prescriptions. Like I still think about this, not that I'm planning on getting one, but it's like when I heard Casey, when I heard you talking, when you're on the talk show, talking about like the prescription lenses and stuff, setting aside the price, I was like, what prescription would I tell Apple? Because Gruber's like, I came to the thing and they just asked what my prescription was. Because I have 2 sets of glasses now. I haven't moved to bifocals or progressives, but I have my computer glasses that I'm wearing now to look at my screen. And then I have my TV watching glasses and my driving glasses that are my distance glasses. I don't know which prescription I should give them. What distance, because my computer glasses are made to be comfortable for me looking at my screen that's like an arm's length, right? And my driving glasses are basically 20/20 at infinity, it's for distance stuff. What prescription would I even give Apple? And believe me, I'm not the only old person with 2 different prescriptions for up close and far away. There are a lot of us. And so that's got to be part of the experience. It's not like you're going to go into the Apple Store and they're going to say, what's your prescription? Because that's not an easy question. You have to say, what's your prescription when viewing things from X distance? And I don't even know what that distance is. Is it the distance that they typically hang windows by default in front of you? Is it the distance the screens are from your eyes?
Well, I think yes. I mean, remember we talked about that whole like convergence effect thing earlier in the fall. And it does seem like they are optimizing for the equivalent distance of whatever it is, like a few meters in front of you, like wherever the default spot is, they put windows and kind of like on this axis around you.
Meters. How far is that in feet?
Yeah, I think it's something like 8 or 10 feet in front of you, I think.
But like this is all this is say that getting the experience Apple wants you to have from their Vision Pro is going to be trickier than any other Apple product, even more so than the watch. And gray market is just going to exacerbate that. And that's just part of being an early adopter, and people will suffer through it. But boy, it's got to really eat Apple up because they spent so long trying to make this product and get the right set of face shields, and they know how it should work, like internally or whatever. Just to know that like 20% of basically everyone outside the US who has this thing is having a substandard experience. What can you do?
I think the Vision Pro is going to be the story of the first few months of the year, at least. I'm a little concerned for Apple that the press and like the hype won't stick as much as they want it to, because it's going to be such like a slow buildup of a market. I think they have put so much into this product, like in terms of their time and resources and everything, but when was the last time Apple launched a really high-profile, brand-new product that was not expected to be a massive volume hit at the start?
Well, it was the iPhone.
Yeah, that's it, and that was a long time ago, and that was a very different company. And now, like you can say something like, "Oh, the Mac Pro," but that's not nearly the resources that went into the Vision Pro.
They haven't launched anything that they're fully behind as like, this is a new paradigm. Like the watch was the closest you could say. It's like, this is a new way of computing or whatever. But I think this is fine for Apple because I think they'll weather it fine, because it's almost kind of a relief to essentially be supply constrained in the first year, give them time to get their feet under them, kind of like with the watch. Like Apple has an idea of what they think this thing will be good for, but what does the market think? And so this will be a big story in early 2024, and I think it will settle down and people will forget about it and move on, and that will give the product time to grow into itself, right? And because, either they all sell out, or the story is Apple couldn't even sell 1 million of them and it's too expensive and blah, blah, blah. Like,
with that voice too.
Yeah, Apple's not going to be scared by that. Apple's not going to go, oh my God, forget it. We did so badly. We're just going to cancel this product. No, they're going to ride out 2024. No matter what happens, they're going to learn from what's out there in the market, and 2025 they'll regroup and, continue on. So I'm not worried about all the inevitable stories and the low sales due to either supply constraints or lack of demand or whatever. And even if it's best case and we're like, they sell out instantly and people are spending huge amounts of money for them in the gray market and everybody wants them and it's just so exciting, but they can't make them. And they make the stories like, oh, Apple should have, found another supplier for those screens or whatever. Even if the very best happens in that scenario, it's still going to be like just a rookie year for the Vision Pro. Don't expect it to take over the world. Even the iPhone didn't take over the world in its first year of sales. It was a curiosity. It was a thing that people who could tolerate AT&T used, and it was like, I'm not so sure about this. And the iPhone is like, the best-selling consumer product ever. So do not expect the Vision Pro to do better than the iPhone in its first year. And if it does 10 times worse, don't worry about it. I feel like Apple is pretty dedicated to this. Even if it 100% flops, I think they're going to keep plugging away at this.
Well, and I think I don't think Apple's going to have any trouble selling as many as they can make this year. Like they're going to sell every single one they can make,
because they can't make that many.
Right. It's going to be back ordered. It's going to be hard to get. Like they're going to sell them all. That's not going to be the problem. But what I am envisioning is that people are going to buy it with a set of expectations about what they're going to be able to use it for. And then that will change, because that's what happens with new tech categories. It happened with the Apple Watch. It happened before that with the iPad.
I mean, remember, the iPhone didn't have an app store when it launched. So talk about changing the way people use the device. The people who had the first iPhone are using it differently than we are, because there was no app store.
And this is going to go through the same kind of hype curve of like, you're going to have, now before it's actually out, but after it's been announced, You have people saying, "Oh my God, this is we're gonna have to rethink cities. Like I'll be able to get all my work done in this headset. I'll never have to buy a computer or a monitor again." And you're gonna have those people go out and buy it. It's not gonna fulfill that expectation for some percentage of those people. The expectations are gonna crash, saying, "I tried living my entire life in a Vision Pro for a month, and this is what happened."
And my face is all sweaty and my nose hurts.
Right. So then the expectations are going to crash. You're going to have people like Federico who actually will figure out how to get all their work done in it. And it's going to be, a whole bunch of complex hacks to make it work for you. And then, and you're going to have people say, actually, I traveled only with this device for this trip, and here's how I did it. So there's going to be this, this big, roller coaster of press for it from people who were kicking the tires, trying it out, tech enthusiasts, people who are trying to live in it and do, way too much stuff in it. Then you're going to have all the people saying, I tried this and it was bad for reason X, and then all that's going to crash. And then people are going to try it again and try different things, and some new app will come out for it that'll make it better. And it's going to be that kind of roller coaster for a while. It's going to be a fun year in the sense that that kind of experimentation I always find really fun and entertaining for both myself to try to do it, but mostly to listen and watch to what other people are doing with it, and kind of experience it vicariously through other people who have more time than I do. But at the end of that roller coaster, I think this product is going to be really great for the market that it finds. But that's not going to be a big market for a while for lots of reasons. Price, supply, apps. It's going to be, there's lots of reasons why it's not going to be a huge market yet. And I hope that everyone, including Apple, is able to keep perspective that when it comes out and does not set the whole world on fire, that's not necessarily a failure. It's just the early part of its lifetime and the earliest part of this market. But ultimately, I'm very excited for that market. I think there's a lot of good uses for it, but it's going to be a slow start.
Marco, do you plan on buying one?
Of course, immediately. Because here's the thing: as a developer of these platforms, my app will be there, whether people will use it. Now, I was looking earlier today, I allow people to run my iPad app on Apple Silicon Macs. That has now accumulated a very large number of Mac users. I have more Mac users than I have iPad users, which that's not what I would have guessed. But that's the reality. I plan to allow my app to run as long as it doesn't have major problems, and I will see what kind of usage it gets, and I will make decisions from there about when and whether to make a native version. But I have some ideas for a native version I think are good. I'm going to want to try them. I'm going to want to try them immediately because, even though my likely market of Vision Pro owners in the first year is probably going to be fewer people than use the large widget. It's going to be some slice of a slice of a slice. Numbers wise, relative to my entire product and my entire audience for my app, it's going to be nothing. But it's important for me to be there for other reasons. There's value in the people who are the influencers and the press. There's value in them seeing my app there and using it and knowing it's there. There's a certain level of demand there that I want to address from that kind of person. There's value to Apple and therefore value to me indirectly through favor with Apple. So there's all sorts of reasons why I will probably want to be there anyway. Numbers are not one of them, and I expect the Vision Pro and the Overcast app for it to be a massively money-losing operation for me for a while. But I absolutely will be buying one the second I can get my hands on one, and I think a large portion of the early buyers will be developers and companies that are buying it to test their stuff on and to develop for. But we'll see. I mean, that being said, a lot of small developers are super uninterested in paying $3,500 for this.
Hi.
Right. I think it's not as much of a slam dunk for every developer out there to buy this as, say, the first iPad was, because we had different expectations and it was way cheaper. This is very expensive, and anyone who's running the numbers is well, how much money am I going to make with my software on Vision Pro? And is that going to help pay for the $3,500? No, it will not. Not for a while, at least. So that's going to impact the market to some degree. It's not going to be purchased by every iOS developer out there. Like that's not going to happen for lots of reasons. But they will be bought by some developers. And some YouTubers and influencers and just people who want to try it, business travelers, rich people. Like there is a market for it, and it's going to be really fun and amazing. But it's not going to be the next iPad or Apple Watch for a while, if ever.
Yeah. I don't know what I'm going to do because I don't know that I have an overabundance of interest from a user's perspective, but I do feel some amount of responsibility as the developer of Call Sheet. I feel a fairly considerable amount of responsibility as one of the 3 hosts of this program. And since John doesn't want to take the fall and it's always up to you and me to take care of this, then...
hey, I bought this Mac Pro. You've got a lot of spending to do.
I mean, only a few Vision Pros, though.
Yeah, right? Well, then again, he did option that Mac Pro. So we're looking at 10 Vision Pros. How much did you spend on that damn thing? It
maybe
doesn't matter.
3 or 4.
Yeah, but anyway, it's certainly more. It covers both of your Vision Pros. So go ahead.
Oh, I see.
Plus, you both have apps that legitimately could be on the platform. It's not like you're just doing it for the show.
Honestly, Call Sheet, it probably has a much bigger audience on Vision Pro than Overcast does.
Exactly. You're watching a movie. You look to your left and you say some voice thing and says, "Who is that?" And then your app captures the video. No, forget it. You can't do that. Anyway,
no, you can't do any of that.
You can't do any of that.
I think it was during the talk show that Gruber and I were talking this out, and it occurred to me that I don't think Call Sheet can run side by side with a video player because, the best of my understanding, a video player is an immersive experience. There's 3 different experiences. There's the windows, I forget what they call them.
Spaces, volumes.
Spaces, that's it. Thank you.
But I will remind you what the early versions of iOS and watchOS and iPadOS look like and what their limitations were and how long those lasted. So
that's fair.
Yeah. Don't worry too much about it. I feel, yes, I know that the limitations that they have now, but this is like the 1.0-iest of 1.0s. And inevitably, once this product comes in contact with developers and apps and users, that is all going to change so fast. It even changed on the iPad eventually. So I have much faith that applications like yours will eventually be able to do same things. But I do agree with you that right now, there's probably a bunch of annoying limitations that make it difficult for you to do what you want. And then you should give that feedback to Apple, and they'll incorporate that into the next version of the OS.
Well, honestly, I think first of all, I think you'll be in the clear. Second of all, if you're not, app switching exists, and people figure it out pretty quickly. Like, so, I think you're fine either way. But I think this is probably going to be a device that gets a lot of like movie and TV watching done on it. So the market for Call Sheet is I think much more direct than the market for people who want an audio-only podcast player.
Well, they could be listening to podcasts while they're working on their spreadsheets and their Vision Pro headset.
They can. I mean, and that's why people use the Mac app. It's hard for me to understand the needs of that market because I'm not a listen to podcasts while working kind of person. So I don't ever use Overcast on my Mac, but I use it constantly on my phone because I'm like, when I'm out and around doing stuff and walking the dog and washing dishes, like that's when I listen to podcasts. But I don't understand how people listen to podcasts while working because my brain doesn't work that way. So I don't know how people are going to use it necessarily in Vision Pro, but it's not like I can envision. I can envision a situation where you might want an experience in Vision Pro where you're like transported to some place. Like you want to like hang out on top of a mountain and maybe just put a podcast on and listen to it. I can envision that being a market. Again, I don't know how big of a market, maybe a few hundred people in the first year. Like it's not going to be a big market, but I can envision use cases like that. The Vision Pro is a very broad product. It can do a lot of things. We don't really know yet what is going to be its most popular uses, but I can hazard a guess that it's going to be very consumption focused. I think in practice, so very very much like the iPad, where I think there will be people who will do productivity work on it, but I don't think that's going to be the most common case. I think it is much more likely that people will use it more for media consumption and like immersive experience consumption than doing your spreadsheets and email. Like I think, again, you will be able to do your spreadsheets and email in it. I don't see that being a huge part of its use case. So then, like, are people going to listen to audio podcasts? I mean, while they watch videos, probably not. But while they sit on a mountaintop, maybe. So again, like this all remains to be seen. It is a very clear-cut case for call sheet because there's going to be, I think, a lot of video watching in this device.
Yeah, we'll see. But I am not looking forward to spending $3,500+ on something that its use as a person to me, I'm not entirely convinced yet. But again,
you're going to have one on day one.
I think I'm gonna. I've convinced myself I need to. I probably need to.
You're gonna buy it, and you're gonna grumble about the price, and you're gonna love it.
I'm going to buy it. I'm going to grumble about the price. I think I'll say it's extremely cool. The question is, will I pick it up after completing whatever I need to do with call sheet? I don't know. Maybe I will. Maybe I'll love it. I don't know. But we'll see. I wish I could talk about what happened at the labs. Anyway,
I know, me too. I'm dying here.
It's killing me. All right, John, tell us about OLED iPads. What do we think is happening there?
This is, we just both talked about Vision Pro, but OLED iPads are the product that I'm most excited about for 2024 from Apple, believe it or not, because I'm for sure going to buy these if they are OLED iPads, because I use my iPad to watch video all the time, and an OLED iPad would do a better job of showing video because it would have better black levels. I want this so bad. It hasn't been that long since I got my iPad. I have an M1 iPad. It's not that old, but the OLED screen is reason enough for me to upgrade. For the wider market, as we've discussed in the past, we hope that they'll rationalize the iPad line, update the Pros to have the landscape camera, figure out what they're going to do with the pencil. After taking the year off, essentially, 2023, the iPad took that whole year off. All we got was the weird pencil. 2024 is the year of actually releasing iPads, some of which we hope are good. And the only reason I highlight this as item number 2 is because this is the one I'm definitely going to buy. You two are going to try to get Vision Pros if you possibly can. If they don't sell out in the first 30 seconds, I am absolutely buying an iPad, and I think I'll have an easier time getting one. And it will be cheaper.
Yeah, well, it's hard to be more expensive than...
Well, if you got the 8 terabyte model, maybe it would be the same price, but we'll see.
And by the way, Vision Pro starting at $3,500. We don't know the details of that statement yet. All they said was starting at $3,500.
Each individual prescription lens is $1,500. There's a Porsche option prices.
I know you're joking, but it wouldn't surprise me if they are hilariously expensive.
Yeah, blue stitching, an extra $400.
Just hope that you can't adjust the storage at all.
Yeah. Well, but like, what is the storage going to be used for? How many people buying it will even know yet? Like, I don't know how much storage I need on my Vision Pro. I have no idea.
Better get the big one, I guess.
Well, or like, do you want to invest that much extra money in like version 1.0 that's going to be obsolete, first?
I get the big Apple TV. It's a little bit less expensive, but
Yeah, it's like, what is it, $50, $30?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No, but so the iPad I think is going to be, I've kind of fallen out of using the iPad for almost anything, but I go in phases. I go up and down. I'm sure when they launch them, I'm going to be like, oh, I want that because it's new and shiny and OLED, and I'll rationalize myself buying one for some reason.
Especially if it's dual layer OLED screen that some of the rumors are leading to. It's super bright, really amazing quality. It would essentially be the best quality screen available on an Apple product because it will surpass the LCD mini LED things on the MacBook Pros and certainly surpass the XDR.
Yeah, that would be great. But yeah, like I'm mostly just curious to see what they do with the iPad Pro, especially because the iPad Pro has not seen a meaningful update redesign since 2018. It is pretty long in the tooth now. I really want to know, like, do they address things like the pencil attachment mechanism, any kind of pencil charging changes, because like there's rumors that there's going to be like a new Pro pencil as well. What do they do about where the camera is? Like, one of the biggest annoyances of using the iPad Pro for me is that the camera's still on the short side, and I almost 100% using it in the little keyboard flappy thing. Not the Magic Trackpad equipped one, the one before that, the straight one that Craig Federighi uses. So I use that one, and so the camera's always right under my left hand. Like, as when you pick up the iPad, it is directly under where you pick it up by.
And it warns you about it, which is when you have to add a software feature to compensate for a hardware thing, that's when you know the hardware thing is outlived its useful life.
Yeah, and they did update one of the lower end iPads to have the camera like on the long edge like a laptop. So if you're holding it in landscape, it's in the top middle. That, I think, is the clear answer for where it should be on the iPad Pro and on probably on all iPads as well. But it interferes with where the pencil attaches right now in the current iPad Pro. So this is a question, like, where do you put the pencil? If you put it on the short side, that has other downsides. You can still put it on the long side, but like change where the magnets are so you can fit the camera between them or something. Like there's options.
Yeah, that's what everyone assumes they're going to do. That's like the whole reason for the new pencil. I'm sure the pencil will have new features, but the main reason is, we have to rejigger the internals to make room for the camera that's on the long side, and that'll be the Apple Pencil 3 or whatever. So, and I just want to say that if they come out with a new iPad and it has an OLED screen and they change nothing else about it, I'm still getting it, because I'm not going to be like, I'm going to wait until they have the landscape camera. That's not what I'm using the iPad for. I do have a pencil and I do use it, and it is annoying that my hand covers the FaceTime camera and everything like that. But still, no matter what they do, if they do like the new Mac Pro that launched this very podcast, it's exactly the same iPad as we have now. But the only difference is a new OLED screen. I'm still getting it.
I mean, that would still be a huge upgrade,
and it would be incredibly disappointing to everybody but me.
Yeah, but I do hope there's more. I mean, as you mentioned, 2023, there were literally no new iPads released, and the state of the iPad lineup, as we discussed previously, is really messy right now because it seems like they're like halfway through multiple different important transitions. Things like moving the camera, unifying the pencils, like stuff like this. Like there's a lot of like half-done transitions in the iPad lineup. There's way too many iPads. The differentiation between them is odd and confusing. There's lots of little nitpicks of well, you can use this keyboard with this one, but not with this very similar one. They have 3 different iPads that are all within a half-inch screen size of each other. It's a weird lineup. What I expect and hope from 2024 for the iPad is for us to finally get the answer of where is the iPad going, and give us a coherent lineup that puts us there. That I really hope for, and I think is likely to actually happen. I'm sure they're going to do the thing where they keep around an old model of the cheap one, but they're already still doing that. So they currently have 2 base models, basically, the more modern designed one and the one that still has the home button and the forehead and chin. And so hopefully they're able to get rid of the home button one finally, move the more modern one down to that slot, and then give us the new base model. So there's a lot to do in the iPad lineup. It seems like they're slated to do all of it this year, basically, because I think every iPad approximately is due for an update. So we will see. I hope they do it. I hope they do a good job, and I hope whatever changes are coming to the iPad Pro were worth the wait from 2018.
Fair enough. All right, M3 Ultra, maybe in the Mac Studio, perhaps in a new Mac Pro. What do we think about that?
I mean, I guess really this could have been inverted, but it shows where my interest lies. The Mac Studio and Mac Pro are due to be updated this year. They will presumably get the M3 Ultra, which is a chip that we assume will exist, and it will just be two M3 Maxes stuck together in the usual way. But the thing is, the M3 Max is amazing, and 2 of them will be twice as amazing. So that will be a really good chip. And despite the fact that the Mac Studio will surely come with the M3 Max, it will also come with the M3 Ultra, and that's going to really differentiate it from the rest of the product line. I don't expect any other changes to these products other than them just existing and getting the new chip. And for the Mac Studio, I think that's fine. And for the Mac Pro, it is exactly as disappointing as last year's Mac Pro. No change there. In particular, the M3 Ultra Mac Studio, I feel like is becoming increasingly essential for Apple's supposed ambitions in gaming. They have a long way to go there, but it is nice to be able to have something that they sell that has more GPU grunt than a laptop, right? And the Mac Studio is going to have twice as much GPU grunt as their fastest laptop because it'll have 2 M3 Maxes in there with twice the GPU grunt. Does that make a difference for the tiny amount of games that exist? Well, probably not, but it's, at the very least, again, we'll see how it performs in the benchmarks, but something better than a laptop is kind of one of those really low bar that Apple needs to clear to start taking itself seriously as a gaming company. And we've discussed this many times in the past. It's great that they've raised the floor, that none of their computers stink anymore. They're all pretty good, but you got to have at least one really good one pretty okay one. You know what I mean? And that is the role of the M3 Ultra. It's not the Mac Pro. No one's buying that thing for games, but the Mac Studio is small, cheaper than the Mac Pro. And, it should be, close to twice as fast when running game stuff because it's got twice the GPU. So I'm looking forward. I'm not planning on buying that. I'm still, again, the clock on my 2019 Mac Pro is mostly dictated by Apple. I was thinking over the holiday that, like, how long would I be willing to keep using this Mac Pro after Apple stops supporting it with the latest version of Mac OS? And I think that is a non-zero amount of time for me, because I do want to wait to buy at the right time. You know what I mean? I'm impressed by the M3 series, especially the M3 Max. The M3 Max is often benchmarking it higher than the M2 Ultra in certain tests, right? So I feel like they're pressing on the high end. I want to see what an M4 or an M5 looks like if I can hold out that long. So that's all. I look forward to these computers existing, and I look forward to seeing the benchmarks, and I'm ready to continue to be disappointed by the Mac Pro.
So what is the current plan as of the beginning of 2024 when Apple says no more new macOS releases for Intel? Do you immediately buy a Apple Silicon Mac Pro? Do you slum it and buy a Studio?
No. Like I said, I'm willing to be in, it's stuck in amber of like, okay, it's not supported anymore. I'm just going to keep using it after the version is released that I can't run anymore. How long will I last in that state? I don't know. If you'd asked me before, I'd say, well, as soon as that happens, I'm going to buy one, so I'm never going to be in that state. But now I'm thinking that I'm willing to be on the previous year's OS that Marco can never remember the name of for a non-zero amount of time. Is that going to be 6 months? Is that going to be a year? It's kind of be like me in buying TVs. Like, I want to pick the right time to buy. Ideally, I would like to wait to see them do something more than the current Ultra strategy with their top end chip. You know what I mean? Even if I buy it in a Mac Studio, I would love to see, as we discussed in the past, a different packaging arrangement, or something different than we've seen them to do with M1 through M3 with respect to the Ultra, right? If I can hold out that long, I will. If I can't, then I'll just get an M4 Ultra Mac Studio. Like, that's my plan essentially. Like, so whatever that, when the time comes when I just can't hold that any longer and it's just untenable, and maybe I need to update it to do dev work on my apps, whatever the situation is, when I get pressed to do it, assuming the Mac Pro is still like it is, I'm going to end up getting a Mac Studio with whatever the best Ultra is.
Because I know we're going off on a tangent. It's my fault. But what do you feel like your Mac Pro is uniquely good at that the Studio isn't? I know the obvious answer is gaming now, but that's not likely to be the case in any future Mac Pro. So, like, you don't have 340 hard drives in there, do you?
I mean, I do have a bunch. I have all my storage is internal. Well, except for my Windows drive, which is external. But I do I have an internal.
But why is that external if everything else is internal?
I have an internal Time Machine drive, an internal Super Duper clone, and then I have the regular boot disk. And I have swapped video cards many times. And I know what you're saying, like, well, you're not going to be able to run PC games because it's not x86, yada, yada. But I do want to buy something with GPU grunt that essentially is going to be sitting there idle in the hopes that Apple's gaming strategy bears fruit. Or at the worst case, that I can boot into Linux and play like Steam games that are for the Steam Deck. You know what I mean? Like, I want the GPU grunt to be there speculatively. Like, it is not as sure thing as, hey, I can boot this thing into Windows and play Windows games. That is a sure thing, right? That's easy to know. Why do I want a Mac with more GPU grunt? That's speculative. That's me crossing my fingers and saying, boy, I hope I can do something gaming related with this extra GPU grunt. And, maybe I'll get burned. Maybe it'll turns out that for the millionth time, Apple's gaming strategy won't work out, and I can't run Windows, and I can't run Linux games with Proton and stuff. But that's the plan.
Why won't you put your Windows boot drive in the machine? You feel like it's tainting it, don't you?
I mean,
that's a yes.
It's mostly because, like, the Windows boot drive, yeah, it probably should be inside the machine, but the tainting is not the reason I did it. But it goes on one of my crappier SSDs because, it doesn't really matter. And I think it's changed a few times. And it was such a pain to get it working on the external one. Now it's kind of like a sunk cost fallacy. But anyway, yeah, I think this thing is probably in its final arrangement of components after many, many swaps and stuff where it's all solid state. It's got that one external. Oh, you know what I mean? When I did the Sonoma drive, that was also external because that's like a throwaway one that I'm constantly erasing and stuff. And I use it on different computers. So
fair enough. All right, iPhone 16. I don't know too much of what to expect from this. Obviously, we've talked about the capture button, which I think could be very interesting, and I'm optimistic about that. I'm slightly terrified about dropping the 5X tetraprism thing into the regular size phones, because I don't know which one I would buy then, because I both like and
What do you mean you don't know?
You would come back to the medium side.
Yeah,
I think I would.
Especially since the rumor is that the 16 is going to be a little bit bigger than
That's
the 15.
Oh, again? They're doing it again?
Yep.
Yeah, I think the thing that they're doing. Remember that the 15 shrunk because they shrunk the bezels all around it and everything. I think they're essentially not undoing that, but making the screen bigger by an old bezels width, just to give themselves more room internally for the tetraprism camera and a bunch of other stuff. And honestly, I'm fine with that because I'm using a 14 Pro now, and the 14 Pro is bigger than the 15 Pro. So like 15 Pro shrunk a little bit. It sounds like the 16 is going to be the same size as my current phone. And keep in mind that I am buying the 16 because that's my phone year. So from my perspective, the 16 will be the same size as my current phone, but from your perspective, it'll be a little bit bigger than your 15 Pro. And from Casey's perspective, it'll be way smaller than that stupid pop socket thing you've got.
That's true. No, I mean, there are some things I like about this phone, but I do miss having a phone that you can legitimately, without worry, without a dongle on the back or, a wart on the back, use one-handed. I don't have gigantor hands like Mike Hurley does, and so I really do need some sort of affordance on there. And so I am cautiously and tentatively optimistic that maybe I would be able to go back to the human-sized phone again, which I think would be kind of nice. I'll miss the real estate, and I'll miss maybe the battery life, although that hasn't been as night and day as I had expected. But it would be nice to have a phone I could use one-handed again. So I don't know, Marco, what are your thoughts on the iPhone 16?
We don't know a ton about it yet, but if the rumors are true that it's going to be, add in capture button and give me the 5x lens, that's great. I am looking forward to that because the 5x lens I am super envious of. Whenever I have a moment to see TIFFs or to use it, I'm always like, man, I wish I had this on my phone, but I don't wish enough to get the giant phone. So again,
that's fair.
hopefully I get that. And otherwise, I don't really know. I'm very. This is what happens every year. I'm very happy with the iPhone I have now. But I'm sure they'll find a way to make me want to buy the new one.
This will have the realigned cameras on both of them, by the way, on both the 16 and the 16 Pro, like the realigned cameras for spatial video, because they'll both be able to do it. And the rumor is also that they'll both have the capture button, and like it won't be a Pro only feature. So. And there are some, we talked about this a million times when we were talking about the SoCs, like what are they going to do? Is there going to be A18 Pro and an A18? Are they going to be unified? Are they going to be split? Is there going to be one that's like last year's model but with GPU things? We don't know what they're going to do with the SoCs, but it seems like from the physical feature sets, they're both going to have the aligned cameras and they're both going to have the capture button. At this early stage, I still feel like the capture button is kind of like the solid state volume buttons, and it's the type of thing that we could be hearing plans from back in time, and really that decision was reversed and we won't know about it until the next round of rumors comes out, you know what I mean? And maybe there just won't be a capture button and we'll wait till next year. But from what I've heard, it sounds like the 16 line will be more unified and coherent than the 15 one was. But we'll see. It's a long ways off. But, the iPhone is, especially with no rumors about anything radical, it's just like, it's a year where they're consolidating gains from the previous phones. And, it's not... Every year the iPhone is good. I don't think there's any chance of it being terrible, but I don't think there's much chance either of it being something like an iPhone 10 type revelation.
Yeah.
Actually, and I'm glad you brought up the spatial video thing, John, because that, I think, would be a huge motivator. If it can take spatial video better than 1080p 30, which is very restrictive.
Yeah, that might be a differentiator on the Pro. Like they'll both have the aligned cameras for spatial video, and the rumor is that the ultra wide that is aligned with it is going to be 48 megapixel, and maybe only on the Pro you'll get better frame rates, better resolution, whatever.
And look, I know this decision's already been made 15 years ago, but if you have to raise either the frame rate or the resolution, and you can't do both, give me the frame rate, please. Like 30 FPS is tough.
I think with the Vision Pro, I think the resolution may have more bang for the buck because it's so big in your field of vision. You know what I mean?
I'm not allowed to tell you whether I know what you mean.
Yeah, okay. Anyway, yes. Casey and Gruber discussed it with it's not as big as Panoramas. Panoramas is where it suffers the most, according to Gruber, but the spatial video is apparently smaller, but still, it's pretty big.
I definitely can't tell you any of that. However, I can tell you I really want more resolution out of my cameras now.
More frame rate, you mean?
Both. Well, I would suggest for panoramas, you would probably want a lot of resolution.
Yeah.
Like one of the things that I am really looking forward to in the Vision Pro, Merlin introduced me to this Polycam app where it basically it's one of these apps that uses like the LiDAR and the cameras and everything, and you can make like a 3D capture and make a floor plan or a whole like 3D map of a room.
As long as your room is not filled with junk, I know from experience.
Right.
Yeah, but but like that's a really cool thing. I'm looking forward to just like I don't know if you can even do this yet on Vision Pro, but I'm sure it will come fairly soon if you can't. Like whatever standard, USDZ scene formats that these kind of things can output, I want to be able to capture a place with my iPhone using something like Polycam and then be able to like be in it in the Vision Pro at a later time. Like, oh, what was it like to be, in my room in this one apartment that I captured, and then I don't live there anymore, like that kind of thing. Like that would be so cool to me. What was it like on this vacation? What was our hotel room like? What was my kid's room like when he was this age? I would love to be able to capture that kind of stuff and then kind of just experience it in the Vision Pro. And I think one thing that you will probably want if we see that is the most resolution possible on those captures, because what you are seeing in the Vision Pro, the field of view it is simulating is massive compared to a phone or a computer screen. So the pictures that we take today on our little iPhone camera sensors or whatever, a single picture, yeah, that looks great on your phone. If you're lucky, it might look okay on your laptop screen, but when you put it onto like a 50-foot tall virtual screen or something, that's a different experience.
That's also when people complain that I'm nitpicking when I say, well, iPhone photos are fine unless you're quote unquote pixel peeping. Well, guess what? Everyone inside of Vision Pro is pixel peeping. Because everything is so much bigger. So it could be the side of a billboard, and suddenly you see. I mean, we talked about last time with the picture of you towing your car on the beach, and what a mess it made of your face because it was low light.
Yeah.
You're not going to need the pixel peep to see that when it's 50 feet tall in front of you.
Yeah, but like, so I think the rise of these headsets, whether it's the Vision Pro or the Quest series or whatever, like the rise of these headsets, I think is going to increase the demand for much higher resolution phone cameras, basically, that can actually capture a lot more detail of our surroundings and our experiences that we go through in life. And and maybe even big cameras might have a small resurgence because they're so much higher resolution, but I think ultimately it has to go in the phones. Like this has to be, and maybe they'll just do it with a bunch of combination capture. Like, okay, we'll take this.
Yeah, that's what even big cameras do that. Speaking of big cameras with huge sensors, with huge, like big mirrorless cameras with like 60 megapixel sensors also have a mode where they will take 75 pictures and stitch them together for massive resolution. And the phones that's what Panorama is. It's taking a bunch of captures and stitching them together. That kind of technology, like you can't just keep adding megapixels. This is not going to work, especially with the phone. But what you can do is get more and more intelligent modes of taking a whole bunch of 48 megapixel captures and weaving them together into something that looks better and better inside Vision Pro.
Yeah, and talking about like as the Vision Pro market very slowly grows over time, that will give the iPhone a chance to have its cameras grow too. Because if the Vision Pro takes off, and if it sticks around for the long haul and becomes something that a lot of us really want and enjoy, you're going to want the highest resolution captures possible. And current phone stuff, again, looks great on the phone, but when you blow it up, like it doesn't. Most phone pictures don't even look that good on my Pro Display XDR, and that is in the scale of what the Vision Pro is giving us. The XDR is like a relatively tiny app window for the Vision Pro. So it's a very different scale that we're talking about of experiencing our media, and there's going to be just demand for infinitely higher resolution.
That's why, as a consumption device, is another thing in its favor, because in the beginning, professional companies that can take very expensive, huge cameras and actually capture massive resolution, that's the only content that's going to be available that can truly take advantage of the Vision Pro with all the resolution that's available as you turn your head around. And regular people won't be able to make that, certainly not with their iPhones. And most people aren't going to buy like the weird 360 camera rigs that stitch together these high megapixel images. But some companies will be able to, like Apple and other companies who can essentially ship an app that is the equivalent of the single app ebook. Remember those days on the
Yep.
right? It's just like, what is this? It's an app that just shows you a bunch of places, but we capture them with our camera equipment that costs as much as your house.
Yeah, it's 60 gigs.
Yeah, you can't capture this, but we captured it, and it looks amazing, and you're just going to want to sit here and listen to podcasts on Marco's app.
Maybe I should do that. Maybe that's my app. Maybe it's like I create an immersive experience that I like film some mountain somewhere with some crazy camera.
Yeah, it gives you an excuse to buy another $200,000 worth of 3D video capture equipment and then go on top of a mountain.
I definitely have not recently purchased a very high resolution camera.
Oh gosh. All right. After show. Apple Watch 10. I'm excited to see. I got to imagine they're going to make this look different, and I'm excited to see what that looks like.
I mean, some people keep saying with the Roman numeral X10, right? That it's like, it'll be like the iPhone 10 or Mac OS 10. It'll be the time they change the form factor. But what if they're not ready to change the form factor? Then it's just going to be Apple Watch 10 with a 1 and a 0, and we'll worry about it next year. Like, this would be a convenient time, but sometimes convenient times don't always line up. I hope it is a new form factor. It is a reasonable time for it to be one, but there's no like pressing need, like they have to do it or whatever. And if it doesn't line up, it doesn't line up. Hey, look what they did with the iPhone. They were ready early, and so they just skipped 9. It's fine.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's true, but I don't know. I just have a gut feeling that's going to happen.
It'll be cool. It'll be cool if they use the X too.
I think we're ready for it. And I'm honestly like, I'm a little scared because, the Apple Watch is what I wear most days. And I'm a huge, watch snob. And I'm currently like, I'm happy with the Apple Watch. I don't super love it. I don't super hate anything about it. We're in a nice, stable place. And I'm a little worried if they're going to like take some big moves. I'm a little worried they might, mess some stuff up. Like, I gotta say, I still don't love watchOS 10, but that's a story for another day, I guess. So, we'll see what they do with the hardware. So I'm a little nervous, but their track record with the Apple Watch hardware is really good, with the exception of the first one just being so darn slow and everything. But that wasn't really their fault. Recent generations of the Apple Watch hardware have really just been amazing. It's been a little boring, with the exception of the Ultra, which was a huge hit. But the regular Series Apple Watch, it doesn't change much in recent years, but every year brings some kind of like little incremental changes that over time add up. And so the recent Apple Watches are great. But as I said last time this came up, like I would like to see some refreshing and variety happen in the Apple Watch lineup, just because it is still jewelry. So some updates and refreshing over time are a nice thing to have. So I'm looking forward to that. The whole strap attachment rumor things has me a little nervous.
Yeah.
But again, you look at Apple's track record on making straps, they're amazing. Like, Apple has the best watch straps in the watch industry by a huge margin, generally speaking. Like, yeah, one or two nice ones from other vendors exist, but like Apple watch straps on the whole, and I'm really mostly or only talking about the ones by Apple, not by third parties, which are largely garbage. But Apple's own Apple Watch straps not only are amazing today, but have been amazing for the entire run of the Apple Watch. Like, even the very first ones they launched with the very first Apple Watch, those straps were all amazing. Like, they were super good straps. So they're really good at this. And if they're going to redo the strap mechanism, I trust that they're probably going to come out with some really nice straps to go with it too. So I'm looking forward to this rumor of this, big Apple Watch revamp. I think it's time, and I trust that they will probably do a really good job with it.
I feel like this strap rumor is the one that I'm most willing to believe. They couldn't get that one done. Like, if I had to rank them, like new shape redesign for 10 is higher ranked for me than new shape and also new strap, because as our previous discussion, maybe they couldn't figure out something better, and so it goes in the back burner for a few more years or whatever. But having them both would be great. That would really be an Apple Watch 10. New design, new strap, new everything. It would be very much like the iPhone 10.
Well, but the thing is, like, according to the rumor that, like, one of the reasons they were looking at a new strap attachment mechanism is because the current one takes up a lot of space in the case, which is true. It might be that in order to get a new case shape design, they had to change the strap mechanism to get that extra space out.
If they tied them together, then either both of them are pushed off or neither one. But it's so hard to tell from these rumors because, see previous Apple Watch rumors, they have not been entirely reliable about form factor changes. So
no, they've been comically unreliable. But, if you think about what Apple could do with more interior space of an Apple Watch, the answer is very obvious. add more battery and therefore give the watch more capabilities and make it, raise the specs basically, and or make it thinner, both of which would be wonderfully welcome for the Apple Watch. I would actually say that they've come far enough in the thinness department in recent minor revisions. I actually don't think it needs to be that much thinner. I'm happy with it where it is. A little bit thinner would be like a little more elegant, but it's not screaming for being thinner, but it is screaming for resources.
I think you still have to fight the thinness one, because I think we would all agree an Apple Watch that's 1/4 the thickness could be amazing. It opens up a whole new design possibilities, like a really thin one, but we know we just can't do that with current technology. I feel like we need to keep much more so than the phone, because it's not something that you hold in your hand. Thin watches exist and are a good look and are cool, and Apple should pursue that. It is still thicker than, if you said, Apple, we have a magic battery that can be any size and give you the same amount of energy, they wouldn't choose to make it this big. It is thicker than Apple would choose to design. It's thicker than anyone would choose to design. We just know it has to be that big. So I get what you're saying, that it's not so big that it's an impediment, but watches, unlike phones as we know them today, can tolerate being a lot thinner than these things are.
Yes, but it doesn't look like a thick watch. It looks like a kind of regular range of a watch thickness. It doesn't need it. You're right that it would be nice if it's thinner, but like if they're going to gain a decent chunk of internal volume to use for something, like to spend somehow.
Oh yeah, I'm not saying this year. I'm saying like 20 years from now. Apple shouldn't stop pursuing thinness, because we're never going to get to the 20 years from now a really thin watch if they don't continue to pursue it. And the flip side of that is there is obviously the style in the watch industry of like, it is ridiculously thick because that is the style.
Well, that's a style. It's not universal.
Yeah, well, I mean, the Ultra fulfills that, but there are very thin watches and there are also very thick ones. And the thick ones are not thick because they need to be that thick. It is a style. And I feel like the Ultra, that's where the Ultra lives right now. And I'm happy with that one. But for the regular watch, I would love to see it be thinner in a decade rather than the same size.
Ultimately, what I want to see for the watch is anything that can raise its limits. Like it is such the entire watch software platform is so extremely limited by its need to conserve power very aggressively, in order to have, useful battery life. And if they can give it, 20% more battery space, whatever it would be, if that would then allow them to let the watch loose a little bit more with its own resource usage, that opens up much more software potential. That opens up potentially like more responsiveness for the user, more on-device features. Like it makes the entire watch experience potentially much better if they can lift some of those limits. So that could pay off in a much bigger way than making it a millimeter thinner, in my opinion. We are brought to you this episode by Notion. Notion combines your notes, docs, and projects all together in one beautiful space. And now, navigating that space is easier than ever thanks to Notion's new feature called Q&A. This is an AI assistant that can answer questions about all of your content in Notion. So, for instance, you can answer questions about next quarter's roadmap from a document. You can find that marketing campaign proposal you're looking for. You can dig up a long-lost link, all in seconds with Notion AI. It can give you instant answers to your questions using information from all across your wiki, projects, docs, and meeting notes, all in Notion. So if you have an urgent question that you'd normally maybe turn to a coworker to ask them and interrupt them, just ask Notion's Q&A instead. It'll search through thousands of documents in seconds, answer your question in clear language, no matter how large or complex your workspace is. You can ask Q&A questions from anywhere in Notion. So whatever you're in, the document or presentation or whatever, you can stay in that document and stay focused on what's important and quickly get information you want out of Q&A. And you can trust that your data is secure and private. Notion AI is designed to protect your information. No AI models are trained with your data. The data is always encrypted, and answers will never use information from pages that you shouldn't have access to. So when you use Notion AI, it is a great way, and it's easier than ever to do your most meaningful work. You can try Notion AI for free when you go to notion.com/ATP. That's all lowercase letters, notion.com/ATP, to try the powerful, easy-to-use Notion AI today. And when you use that link, you're supporting our show. So once again, notion.com/ATP, all lowercase. Thank you so much to Notion for sponsoring our show.
AirPods 4. I don't have too much to say about this. We have in the show notes that they're supposed to be getting a new design, an updated case, and potentially even active noise cancellation, which I think would be great for non-AirPods Pro things. Apparently, the case will have speakers for Find My alerts. It'll have USB-C, obviously, and then apparently a higher end version of the AirPods 4, not the Pro, but the AirPods 4 will have ANC. Like I said,
AirPods 4 Plus.
Yeah, right. Or 4 Max. No, I think AirPods 4, sounds good. I mean, I don't have any particularly strong thoughts about this. I think I'll probably stick with the AirPods Pro forevermore because they are so freaking good. But I think more of that tech flowing downhill to, regular stuff. I'm here for it. Sounds good to me.
2024 is the year of stuff for me. OLED iPads that no one's really interested in, AirPods 4 that no one's really interested in, but I am, and it's also my iPhone year. I'm a little bit confused by the AirPods 4 rumor with there being two versions, one of which has noise canceling or whatever. Only confused because they haven't come right out and said, oh, by the way, the one that has noise canceling will be shoved into your ear canal, which is not what I want. Right? The reason I use AirPods 3 is I don't want things shoved into my ear canal. If they have two versions of the AirPods 4, surely one of them will not be shoved into my ear canal. I don't know what the word is for this that I keep saying, but anyway, you know what I mean. The little soft, squishy tips that go into the hole in your ear. I don't want that. So if there are two of them, one of them's got to be not like that. But are they also trying to say that the other AirPods 4 will also not go in your ear but have noise canceling? You could do noise canceling, like do the same thing, but not be shoved into your ear canal, but it's not going to work as well at all, right? Just for many, many reasons. But, the rumors are still vague. Anyway, if there are new AirPods, I will probably get them unless both of them go into your ear canals, in which case I'll just ride these out. And I'm willing to believe that I can be converted. If Apple just stops selling the ones that don't go in your ear canals, I'll just have to get used to it. I'll probably survive, but it's not what I prefer. Again, my wife has AirPods Pro now. She's had 2 pairs of them, and I've tried them, and I know what they're like. And it's not like I can't do it. I just don't prefer it. I could get used to it if I had to. And I'm sure if I did get used to it, I'd be like, wow, noise canceling is great. Isn't this wonderful? Yeah, all the things everyone else already knows. I just still prefer the other one. So I'm hoping the AirPods 4 with 2 different models, one or both of them still don't go in your ear canal. And that'll be the one for me as I watch my OLED iPad.
It's a big year for John.
Yeah, all the boring products.
AirPods Max 2 potentially. I mean, I've
question mark time.
Yeah, I've never tried the AirPods Max, so I don't have any thoughts on this other than.
I mean, do they make a USB-C model? Do they actually revise it so they're changed in some way? Do they fix the condensation issue for people with sweaty ears? Do they make them more comfortable? I find them. Granted, I've only worn them in Apple stores or whatever, but I do not find them comfortable. The top of it hurts the top of my head with that stupid mesh thing, and it's not what I prefer.
Yeah, the AirPods Max are really great in certain ways, but they could really use a revision. Like they could really use a version 2 tackling of this problem. They definitely need to get rid of Lightning, of course. We know that. They need the updated processor to have all the newest features of the AirPods Pro, especially at their price. And what I would hope is, what John was alluding to, I would hope they would address comfort a little bit better. The current ones, as talked about many times on the show, they're very heavy because they use a ton of metal and almost no plastic anywhere in them. And that makes it very difficult to achieve good comfort with headphones. Like you can have comfortable, heavy headphones, but you probably won't. It makes it much harder.
You really need to spread what you'd have to do with heavy headphones. You have to spread the weight over a large area, and that looks clunky. And it also means there's more crap in contact with your head, which is hotter and sweatier.
Right, and so it is much easier to make comfortable headphones when they are lightweight. And it is much easier to make lightweight headphones when they use a lot less steel and aluminum than Apple used on theirs. And that's, generally that means plastic. Like that's why when you look at if you look at the competitors to the AirPods Max, the main competitors are the Sony and Bose noise canceling headphones, both of which use large amounts of plastic in their construction. In part, yes, you could say, oh, because it's cheaper. No, the real reason is because it's better for headphones to be plastic because it's much lighter, and that makes them much more comfortable. Also, of course, the AirPods Max have that terrible case. They don't have a power button. There's all sorts of little other things that I think a revision to this product would be very needed and very welcome. Because the other thing about the AirPods Max is that they sound incredible. They sound really good. Their noise cancellation is also really good. Like they compete well on those factors. It's just all the like physical design factors that they really need a lot of help with. So I hope Apple's willing and able to do the kind of update that the product deserves, because again, they sound so good that it's kind of a shame right now that they are held back in these other factors to a lot of people, because sound-wise, they're amazing.
Can we try to speed run these last four, especially since we're in the question marks here?
HomePod, don't care. Apple TV, yes please. LLM powered stuff in Apple OSs, sure, why not? Inside loading in the EU, we'll see what happens. Done.
A little bit faster than I expected, but yeah. So for the HomePod and Apple TV, I think that's just a collective shrug. Like, I mostly agree with what Casey said. With the LLM stuff in Apple OSs, this probably should have been hoisted up farther, because 2024 could be the year that Apple rolls out some of the stuff that it's doing. We mentioned at the top of follow-up, they are doing LLM stuff. We know they're doing it. Is this the year some of it comes out? We all hope so, because Siri's crappy, and we think the LLM stuff could make it better. For all the problems with the LLM stuff, anything is better than current Siri. Like really constrain it. Like, have it only help out in certain scenarios. We just want it to work and be smarter than it is. Like, we're so tolerant of Siri's, disloyalty, I don't know, betrayal, non-functionality, that all of the problems that we know are inherent with LLMs will still not be as bad as what Siri does, right? So I really hope that this is the year that, and it doesn't have to be just Siri. That's why I say LLM-powered stuff in Apple OS. There's tons of stuff they could do with it. It could help out with autocorrect. It could try to summarize things for you. And I say on all Apple OSs, they could roll it on the Mac, on the iPad. Like, I'm ready for Apple to roll out something interesting using LLM technology on all of its platforms, even if it's a small thing, because we know that technology has uses. Like, it doesn't solve the world's problems. It's not a quote unquote AI. It can't even do everything that Siri can do. Like, it's not even ready to step into those shoes, but can it help out a little with autocorrect or search in photos? Yes, I think it can do that. And so whatever those little areas are, especially, again, for something like photos, they could roll that out across all their platforms that Photos exists on. And it wouldn't replace the Photos app. It would just be an existing feature of the Photos app, like search, that suddenly works a little bit better than it used to, thanks to LLM technology that runs locally on your Mac. That's what I'm looking forward to. And then the side loading in the EU stuff, if nothing comes of that, then we just whatever. But if something comes from it, it could be potentially very interesting, because we've speculated about what would happen if there was ever side loading the iPhone, and actually seeing it happen, even if it's not in our country, that's time to get some popcorn.
And honestly, what's interesting about the side loading is, I bet it's not going to be that big of a deal. Like, it'll be a big deal for, like, podcasts and the press and legal. It'll be a big deal for that, for talking about it. But the actual market for, like, who's going to actually do it, I think it's gonna. I think Apple. It's going to be much like the the whole Netherlands dating app thing.
But I was thinking of that scenario, and I think there's a big difference between, like, the dating app scenario where it's like, well, you just have to charge money. Apple will just charge you anyway. I think, again, I don't know the details, but I think this is a scenario where once the side loading door is open, like, granted, you have to go through it the way Apple says you have to, but I don't think Apple can extract any money from side loading. So it's not going to be like Netherlands dating app. It's going to be constrained by what Apple does, like whatever hoops they make you jump through. But once you've jumped through those hoops, Apple doesn't get a cut of anything. Apple doesn't, like, it's all sidestepping Apple entirely. If that's not true, then you're right. It's just going to be like Netherlands dating app. Who cares? But if
yeah, do we know that? Do we know whether that's true? Like, whether they're allowed to charge a commission or whatever?
I don't think. See, we'll see. I don't know the details, but I would imagine that the whole point of this is side loading is different than using a different payment method when you're selling an app through Apple's own app store. This is like, no, I'm not even using Apple's own app store. The whole point of this is people want to have their own app stores, right?
Which, by the way, as a developer, I really don't want this to happen.
I know. How can having your own app store make any sense if Apple's allowed to take a cut? So I have to think that once you jump through whatever hurdles that Apple is going to surely put in your path to sideload anything, that Apple is out of that thing. And if that is true, the reason this is interesting is, let's see what happens when the iPhone is open to all the very hungry, sometimes unscrupulous, but sometimes just plain, like, people who are boxed out of the iPhone before. Is there some market need that Apple has not been addressing that will quickly be addressed besides porn? Right. But even if it's just porn, like, even if it's just a giant flood of porn coming in the side loading door on the iPhone, that'll still be interesting, because we haven't seen this platform exposed to the actual market. It's always been mediated through Apple severely. So we don't actually know what's out there and what might come in through the side loading door. I'm kind of glad it would be happening in the EU and not here in case, bad things happen. But I'm actually interested in something coming of that. And who knows? With these things, you don't know how long they're going to wind on or whether Apple thinks they're already in compliance and all sorts of other shenanigans. So it's hard to make any hard and fast predictions. But when I was thinking about this, I immediately thought of Apple's just going to take their cut. And I'm like, well, wait a second. What if they can't? What if that's the whole point of this thing, that everyone's going to be allowed to have an app store? Like maybe Steam will be on there or the Epic App Store. Maybe what will gaming be like on the iPad if you don't have to go through Apple to launch your game? Maybe that's the only way that Apple actually, gets a hold in AAA gaming instead of just their existing mobile gaming is through the side door of, Steam, the Steam Store and Epic Game Store side loaded for EU people only. We'll see.
My doomsday scenario that I really don't want to happen is if there's no restrictions for side-loaded stuff, and if you can have side-loaded app stores, then I'm afraid that some major must-have app provider like Facebook would say, you know what, Instagram, which we know you're all going to install, is no longer on the App Store. You have to download the Facebook App Store and let it root your phone, basically, like that, and have to only go through them. They have no more protections from Apple's rules, and they only have technical protections, which are much weaker than technical and policy protections. And then me as a developer, do I have to put my stuff in the Facebook store? It's just
only if you want to sell to people in the EU. That's the whole thing about this being limited.
I know, but I hope that outcome doesn't happen. And what will help keep that from happening is if this stays as small as possible. And maybe it'll just be I'm sure Apple will, if they do this, I'm sure they're going to do it in the most reluctant way possible. They're going to only do the bare minimum to satisfy whatever regulation is forcing it. They are going to challenge it at every step. They might, as you said, they might say we're already in compliance with some little piddly crap, and they're still taking a 27% commission or whatever else, and then the EU might sue them or whatever. They have to work through all that. So this could be a huge fight for a long time. I don't for a second believe that Apple is going to give any ground that they are not forced to give. So, for instance, I would not expect that they would allow sideloading anywhere else besides the EU. If they don't have to, they won't do it. And whatever the EU mandate is for sideloading, they're going to do the bare minimum to qualify for that, and they're going to make it as hostile as possible for people to actually do it to ensure no one does it. Whether it's the customer side of scary warnings, or whether it's the legal developer side of you got to give us 27%, or both, they're going to make it so it's really unpleasant for everybody.
And there is that Google case that they lost against Epic that actually is in the U.S. So there are other legal precedents potentially rumbling towards Apple. Maybe not next year, but maybe the year after that. So this being confined to the EU for now does not mean that it's going to be that way forever.
Yeah, but I'm hoping that sideloading on iOS ends up being as much of a nothing burger as sideloading on Android has been. And maybe we'll get a flood of porn. Maybe we'll get we can finally get emulators. Maybe.
Well, but the sideloading on Android has been not a big deal, partially for the reasons that Google just lost that case. Right?
True.
Is that it wasn't naturally that way. Google sort of put its thumb on the scale to ensure that, you can sideload, but you really don't want to do that, do you? That's why they lost that case. So things may change in the future.
And as for the HomePod, I finally reached Casey level. Don't care.
There it is.
I'm slowly replacing my HomePods with Sonos gear, and I am much happier for it. They work a lot better. The HomePod is smaller and looks nicer, and in some situations sounds better, but it has broken my heart too many times. The Sonos gear is really reliable. The Alexa assistant on it is rock solid, fast, and reliable. I hadn't used Alexa in a while because I threw away my last Echo, the ball one that kept dying and being weird. And Amazon's own devices have ratcheted up the annoyance level over time so much that it's by the way, did you know I can annoy you in new and interesting ways if you say this? Most of that seems to be absent on the Sonos version of it. It seems to be a more limited version of Alexa, which in those ways I think is a feature, not a bug. I have been extremely impressed with the Alexa assistant's ability to answer general knowledge questions. Questions that I think are somewhat difficult, like for a voice assistant to answer. Like, knowledge, like, one of the recent things was from Adventure Time, we couldn't remember Marceline's dad's name. And so I asked it, from across the room, what is the name of Marceline the Vampire Queen's father? And it got it. It didn't waffle. It didn't say, well, on the web, I found this thing that might be it. No, it just gave me the answer. It was directly correct. The other day, I asked something like, what was the outcome? Oh, my son was asking about Michael Jackson because one of his songs was on, and it was asking like, oh, how did he die? And we mentioned, oh, well, he had this drug thing, and his doctor was put on trial. And I asked, first of all, how old was Michael Jackson when he died? It got that instantly. Gave me the straight answer, perfect. And then, as Adam was asking about, what happened with his death, I asked something along the lines of like, what was the outcome of the trial for Michael Jackson's doctor? Figuring like that's a pretty tricky question for it to parse. Like, it got it. It was perfect. And I was thinking like, man, asking Siri this kind of question, like, Siri can't even reliably play music when I ask it to play music. Like whereas like Alexa, for all of its faults of, by the way, did you know, it as a voice assistant is really solid. It is fast, it is reliable, and it is surprisingly good at general knowledge questions. Not to mention the fact that it kicks butt on like timers and all that other stuff too. So while it feels kind of gross to like Alexa right now, because I find a lot of the other stuff they do with it kind of distasteful with their own products, as the voice assistant on the Sonos devices, I'm fine with it. I'm totally fine with it. And AirPlay is so much better on Sonos. The sound quality is really great. The sync, the multi-room stuff is rock solid. Like, I am super happy with the Sonos gear. So, sorry, HomePod. I gave you lots of chances. You blew them all, and I'm done with you.
See, this is what you get for using Siri all this time. I've always been telling you that both Alexa and the Google thing are so much better. I think Google is the best one. Alexa is clearly second, and Siri is so far distant. Third is not even funny. And I still do it. It's the game we still play. I still ask all three. And it's just, we always ask Siri for comic relief. Let's see what Siri does with this. And it's always hilarious. And, Alexa and Google depends on what you're asking. I think Alexa having the IMDb database probably helps a lot with those kind of specific questions that it can answer more directly. But the Google Home, I mean, it's essentially, even if it's all it's doing is essentially running the Google search and reading you that aforementioned top summary thing, that is often close to being the answer. Although, as both of these things start to get LLM powered, now I start to go, it would be nice, the Amazon thing, if you told me whether you used LLM to come up with that Michael Jackson age of death, because I would prefer if you didn't, because I'm sure you could give me a plausible age. But now I have to go to the Wikipedia page to check what the actual age was. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to not trust it because it's LLM stuff. Because LLM can give you a plausible answer to all sorts of stuff. But I want to know, is this an answer that comes from? I can't even characterize it. It's like in the days before LLM, the only way you could give that answer is by pulling it off some well-known web page or a database that you have. But now LLMs can give you that answer with zero knowledge. They don't have to know it, and if they do know it, they don't have to give it to you. They just produce something that is plausible, statistically plausible, and lots of answers could be statistically plausible. And you as the user are like, oh, great, it gave us the exact age. The whole point is you didn't know the age. That's why you asked. So you have, unless it tells you like 2 or 97, if it's within a plausible range, you're going to be like, I guess that's the answer. And pretty soon, that's not going to be as true as it is today, which is kind of sad.
I think we are lucky in that I think running LLM inference is still much more expensive than running like a search index like lookup. So like whatever they've already built that didn't use LLMs is probably so much cheaper to run queries against.
Yeah, no, if you ask something about like movies or TV or whatever, doing a reasonable search of the Internet Movie database and giving you the answer that way with a little bit of intelligence is so much better than saying we threw a bunch of crap into this LLM and stuff comes out sometimes. Isn't that cool? Just do the database lookup.
All right. Thanks to our sponsors this week, Notion and Trade Coffee. And thanks to our members who support us directly. You can join us at atp.fm/join. And we will talk to you next week.
Now the show is over. They didn't even mean to begin. 'Cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. John didn't do any research. Marco and Casey wouldn't let him. 'Cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. And you can find the show notes at atp.fm. And if you're into Twitter, you can follow them at CASEYLISS. So that's Casey Liss, MARCOARMENT, Marco Arment, SIRAC, USA Syracuse. It's accidental. They didn't mean to. Accidental. Tech podcast so long.
Do you do any kind of like New Year's resolution or Cortex style themes?
No,
Nope.
definitely not.
Well, I mean, I listened to the show where they talk about them. Does that count? as
Yeah,
something?
right, exactly. Same.
Yeah, that counts a little bit. Yeah,
I listen and think, boy, how unlike me that they are.
Right.
they're very regimented. No, I've often felt like I frequently align with Gray's theme on. So for listeners, if for some reason you don't listen to Cortex, the gist of what we're talking about is that it's a thing Cortex does every year where rather than like a New Year's resolution, and our friend Merlin has very successfully argued against New Year's resolutions over time of being like fairly dysfunctional and generally, generally considered harmful in the sense that resolutions are usually setting yourself up to fail pretty effectively and pretty shortly, and then you just feel bad about yourself, as opposed to what Gray, Mike, and Cortex do is like more setting a theme for the year to kind of guide your thinking and work over the year, as opposed to a resolution that's like, I'm going to, so as an example, like instead of saying like, I'm going to lose 20 pounds by June, like that's a specific goal. You can call it a resolution. But that's the kind of thing that's like, it's very easy for that kind of thing to fail. You also tend to know early on in the year how much you failed at it, and you might then like fall off the wagon and go back to your old habits or whatever. Whereas a theme could be more like health. Like, I'm going to make this the year of improving my health. That is something that it's hard to distinctly fail at. I mean, unless you die, I guess. But like, it's hard. Sorry, like it's hard to like outright fail to the point where you're discouraged from continuing. And it's more like, I'm going to make decisions throughout the year thinking of this as a guiding principle. And so it seems to be much more effective. And my apologies to the Cortex podcast if I have any of this wrong or if I'm mischaracterizing it, but I think that's the gist of it.
There's a YouTube video that explains it pretty well. If we can find that for the notes, we'll put it in. But if not, just search YouTube for Cortex yearly themes.
Yeah, and I think it's a really nice system. It's a really nice reframing of this kind of thing that we do, like getting away from the resolution thing, because again, resolutions are so likely to fail.
Did you two ever do resolutions?
I've done them here and there, and I usually forget, like by the second week of January, I even forget what it was.
Did you forget, or you failed them, or like, or you lose interest? Like
All of the above.
Generally both. Yeah, all three. But yeah, it's I like the idea of the themes, and I oftentimes line up with Gray's themes.
But do you do your own thing? You like the idea of them, and when you hear Gray's themes, you're like, oh, that seems like a good idea. But do you actually ever like say, this is going to be my theme for the year? Even if you're saying, I'm going to adopt Gray's theme, and I'm going to do that this year too.
Generally, for the last few years, yes, I have kind of set a theme. But sometimes I forget what it is, and it might change it like 6 months in.
Wow.
You got to write it down.
That's a great theme.
But generally speaking, like last year, I kind of had the guiding principle of like closing open projects. Because my life was full of open projects.
Yeah, it's not anymore though, right?
Right.
I know that's the problem. Yeah, like moving, house renovation, like all that stuff. Like it just was there was so much going on, and it was very overwhelming. This year, I'm making it the year of Overcast, because Overcast has really suffered the last couple of years in that, like, I've had all this other life stuff going on. I have not been able to give it a lot of time. I actually have turned that around substantially in the last few months. Like, I'm giving Overcast way more time in the last few months, and not only am I making good progress on the big rewrite, but I'm also just much happier. Like, it had been so long since I really had a lot of good programming work done, so I'm much happier doing this now. So I'm really making this year the year of Overcast. That I'm going to get the rewrite out this year. It's going to be a ton of work. There's still a ton to do. I can't tell you when this year it's coming out because I am no better at estimating software timing than anyone else.
That's the thing about themes. The theme doesn't say that it's the year I'm going to ship the new version of Overcast. It just says the year of Overcast. And I would say, based on listening to all the theme episodes over the years, that's probably a little bit too specific for a theme. But still, it not being so specific to say the year I launched the rewrite of Overcast, it is more general than that, but I bet you could go one level more general if you needed to. But since this is not an official Cortex brand theme, this is just a Marco's adoption. And by the way,
a knockoff theme.
now you have recorded it in a place. You haven't written it down in a theme system journal or even a notes document, but you do have recorded it on this podcast. And Casey will forget about it, but I won't.
That's correct.
The theme system journal looks like a really nice product that I would not use because I don't use paper. It looks really nice though.
Yeah, we have computers. People who like paper, but every time I see those things, it's like, this is the whole reason I like computers. So I don't have to do things on paper.
I wish I liked paper and pens and stuff. It looks so cool. Like the whole world looks so cool, and you get all these nice notebooks.
I have to see my own handwriting. That's not cool.
Yeah, I guess that's the problem. Like every time I handwrite anything now, like God, this sucks. I just want to type things.
You're writing everything in graffiti. I know, it's terrible.
Yeah, nice pull. My Palm 5X is already broken, by the way.
Why do your A's not have crosses on them? I don't know how to write anymore. I just do graffiti. I write all the letters in the same spot on top of each other, and then I can't read it later.
Oh my gosh.
No, but with like setting the goal or setting the theme as Overcast, I'm intentionally being a little too specific with that because that's the level of focus it needs this year. If I would instead say something like the year of work, that is a valid thing. I think that was Gray's last year one.
No, that was a Year of New Decade's Dawn sequel.
Whatever. So like,
it wasn't actually. That's just an inside joke. Anyway, their theme, the titles of their themes have had varying quality over the years.
Yes, but in certain years you might want to open new opportunities. In certain years you might want to focus on closing opportunities or focus on the ones you have. Like there can be more broad themes. For me, this year the theme needs to be Overcast. Like it is a huge part of my income. It is like my main business. It is also my main product that I craft. Like it's the main thing I work on as a programmer because I don't work on the CMS. So
right.
So it's very important to me, and it has been neglected. Like I have neglected it because I have been spending too much time doing other work or other needs in my life, and this year is when I need to get back to it, and it makes me confident that I can do it. That I've already been swinging back to it for like a month, and it's been going very well.
A month that you've been doing it? I think you've been swinging back to it for a while now. But although this theme, like obviously Cortex is about productivity and people's work lives or whatever, but themes don't necessarily have to be focused on work life, which is another reason that Overcast is maybe a little bit too specific. And you will hear themes from the two of them that are not absolutely confined to one of the many things they do as part of their work. Obviously, health would be an example of that because that's not work related. It's something you're focusing on yourself. But I'm always waiting for like a yearly theme that has nothing to do with any of their jobs, right? Like Year of Romance. You could apply that to some of their work as well. But like always, the themes are like a thing that applies to one of my businesses and also my life. And I guess health is the closest they've come. But like Anyway, this is not going to be the Year of Romance for me any more than any previous years were because I don't do themes. But I would suggest that for people. Someone should pick that up. Year of Romance. It's out there. Who's going to be brave enough to pick it up?
And I all kidding aside, I really like the idea of a yearly theme, but I don't feel like I have ever landed on one that I can really grab onto and say, yes, this was what I want for this year. And that's not their fault. That's my fault. But I can't get there. And I'm also not disciplined enough. So let's say that this year was the year of work. And then I decide that I just want to get distracted by, I don't know, wiring the house for Ethernet and fiber and whatnot. Well, there goes the year of work.
You could have had past themes, like, again, themes that are not focused on work. You could have had year of reproduction. You could have had multiple years of reproduction.
Yes. Well, in that sense, I have had...
I think you did. I think you did have multiple years of reproduction.
We had probably, 5 years of reproduction?
Not all yearly themes. I mean, it is aspirational, and it is a thing that you went through that is difficult, that guided all your decisions for a long period of time. You just didn't write it down in a little book.
I mean, I guess that's true. But I view, even though I agree with everything you're saying, that the yearly theme by no means has to be work-related, I do view it as as it should be work involved, even if it's not specifically for work. And I don't know. I don't feel like I am good enough and disciplined enough to stick with it. And I think that if they were here to argue with us, they would say, well, it's not about discipline. It's just about guiding your actions and guiding your thoughts. And that's fair.
Yeah, it's what you make of it, I think, largely. And that's by design.
And I don't know. I feel like if this year was the year of, I don't know, perfecting call sheet, which is, again, too specific. I don't know. I can't even think of a good example because I can't think of anything.
The year of living dangerously. There's one for you.
Yeah. Well, how would you live dangerously, John Syracuse? So would you leave the house every once in a while?
Coke instead of Sprite?
I'm leaving the house all the time.
Yeah, but you won't come to New York when 2/3 of the podcast is there. I'm still grumpy. Still grumpy, John.
You were there for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I want to get stuck in the sand.
You know what you could have been there? You know what your reason could have been? To see some of your great friends that you haven't seen in 5 friggin' years. 4, whatever.
Just wait until we all get invited to an Apple event.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, sure. Like you would go anyway. Like you would go anyway. There's no chance. I would
go. I'm ready. Apple, I'm out here. I'm ready to go to Apple events.
Would you? So if they have a big Vision Pro event and invite all of us, which I guarantee you is not going to happen, but if that's for some reason happened, would you go?
Yeah, no, I've ever since I've been out of my job, I've been prepared to go to things that I get invited to by Apple. And the one time it happened, I had to demur because I had my son's high school graduation. And then since then, I've never been invited. So I'm just out here waiting. And I'm sorry, I wanted to go to my son's high school graduation. So sue me. It's like, and if my daughter's going to graduate soon too, and not this year, but next year, I'm going to go to that graduation too, Apple. So don't invite me on the day that she's going to have her high school graduation. But barring that, I'm ready to go to Apple events. I still haven't even been to Apple Park. I still want to go.
Oh, it's really cool.
I'm sure it is. If only someone would invite me.